casks of a capacity not exceeding 700 liters. So 700 liter cask barrel. Cask is barrel is a specific size of cask, but cask and barrel are basically used interchangeably. So when we say cask, we kind of mean barrel. Don't worry about that. This 700 liter limit, that is copied from the rules for single malt Scotch whiskey. So this is a nod to the single malt Scotch whiskey definition that inspired the American single malt whiskey producers to make whiskey in the style that they have, right? This isn't a barrel, it's just a stinking cask. Yeah.
Funny. So not to interrupt here, but I need something in my glass. And
yeah,
I thought I heard you mention Catalea.
Yes.
Do you have is what you're going after right now?
I'm gonna go grab it now. So I didn't want to like stop talking when I'm the only face on air because dead air is a thing.
Dead air is.
But now that you're here, I'm gonna go get a drink. Yeah.
Cool. So now they can look at my dead face on dead air. But no, that sounded really good. Catalea. We didn't touch that last night. We touched on Balcones a little bit, but we didn't sip any. So
I'm gonna do my thing again. People who watched last night's live will have seen me doing this. This is a bottle that I haven't touched in a while, so I know that cork is dry and it's gonna stick.
And I can tell you from experience that this is not the cork that came in this bottle.
Yeah.
And mine was not dry when it broke. So cork.
Well, you get 300 bottles of whiskey or however many you have. I have 350 or something, and you're bound to break a couple of corks. But this season, the last like 3 months, I've broken like 5 corks, and that is essentially never happened to me before. So it seems like my collection is getting to an age where the fact I haven't taken care of my bottles carefully enough is really starting to show.
Yeah. Sean, what's up?
Oh man, this is a sticky cork.
And yes, Spencer, I will agree with that statement. Balcones corks are kind of dumb. I'm a huge supporter of switch to synthetic corks or a good screw cap.
Yep. Interestingly,
I like both options.
Westland had a good screw cap, but it was also really sticky.
Right.
So they've actually moved away from it.
So yeah, some of these Westlands with the screw, I mean, okay, I'm like, and I'm an auto technician by trade, so I don't have pansy hands, so to speak, and I struggle with these screw caps sometimes on Westlands.
Yeah. You got to really crank it just to crack it loose, and then it's fine.
So, but I'm still happy with that. I would rather have that than a busted cork all the time, or a dried out cork that lets air through. And then Westland switches to corks, and they did switch to synthetic, but
yes, so it is a synthetic cork now, and Solom Second Edition is the first bottle I have with that new cork, and also the new beer cask finished and wine cask finished ones,
which I don't have any. But yes, that's when I noticed too is Solom 2 had that cork on it, and I was disappointed. I think I liked the screw cap.
I felt the same way when I first saw this bottle with the slightly, because between the screw cap ones and the current bottle has all this embossed, thoughtfully made Westland, all the branding all over the bottle. Like this is their bottle that they had made for Westland during the glass shortage. And after they stopped using the screw cap one, so this was about a year ago, like November 2023, I went and interviewed Tyler Peterson like a week after he became master distiller. Really cool. That's unfortunately not something I've ever released as an episode because that was one of those recorded in person. It was a distillery tour. So like it's an hour of kind of fluffy content. And then like a sit down for 10 minutes and ask really pointed questions about where your peat's coming from. And I essentially made that into an article, not a podcast, but I kind of would like to revisit that content and see if I can do something with it audio based. But anyway, so in between the screw caps and the current synthetic cork with their own Westland bottle, the glass bottle has their own decorations on it. They were using just a standard, I don't have any within arm's reach, but a standard aspect bottle, right? Like it pretty much looked like this, but it was a neck with no decoration. It didn't have any special writing on the bottle. It was about the same size though. And they had different corks. They had stock corks for the Aspect bottle. So I kind of forgot that that was a temporary thing, and I got used to it because I had, yeah, here's one. So the Westland flagship, before they rebranded the label to be flagship, this is the basic flagship American Single Malt whiskey from 2023. This bottle you can see doesn't have any of the Westland adornments. And on the neck, it doesn't have this ridge. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. So you can see the new one has this kind of ridge that pops out near the top.
Oh, yeah.
And the one in between has a smaller ridge. I can move the neck out of the way so you can see that sort of smaller ridge there. And it's also a synthetic T-top cork, but it's narrower. And there's nothing wrong with that. The new one is great.
So, okay. So when is this from? This one with the, yeah, that one?
2023.
Okay.
So the new one is 20. I mean, you know, approximately, right? Like they didn't change on the calendar year, but like I bought this bottle in 2023 when they were still using the intermediate Aspect bottle. That's what this is. Before they had the one that has the Westland printed on it and the wider T-top cap. And I saw that change and I was like, oh, you changed the bottle again. And they're like, no, that's the redesign we told you we were going to do. That was the goal. And what you're thinking of is the thing we had in between the screw cap and our new design. I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that now.
So that's funny. I have never noticed the bottle changing at all. And I have an old school, you know, heated Westland. So nothing on the bottle, screw cap.
Right.
You know,
That's the screw cap one. Yeah.
Right. And then I have not much newer, the Thoughtfully Made, you know, after they switched from the 3 heritage to just the 1 flagship. This still has a screw cap, but then it does have the embossed Thoughtfully Made Westland Distillery on the top of the shoulder here.
Yep.
And then obviously then I have you know, the Solom 1 and 2, the Calere 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yep. Some of those are going to be the intermediate bottle, just by necessity.
So I've never noticed the actual bottle change, just the enclosure change is all I ever noticed. But
yeah, but I mean, I have an eye for weird little details like that. Which like, hey, maybe that's what makes me I'm going to toot my own horn here and just assume that you all agree that I'm a good investigative reporter of American Single Malt whiskey, right?
I mean, an eye for weird details definitely tracks with you. Yes.
Nika and Centauri have the best screw caps. Completely agree. Yeah, Jason, that comment was from 5 minutes ago, but yeah, the screw caps on Westlands were sticky and that was the biggest problem. And they knew that. That's why they changed to the T-top enclosures that aren't screw caps. It wasn't that the plastic screw cap was a bad idea. It's just that somehow it didn't work with their particular bottle design. It was like the tolerances were too tight and it got stuck.
I think the Nika and Westland screw caps are the same, just
they have a kind of a look about them that's very similar. It's clearly the same concept. It's just that the tolerances on that cap and the bottle was just better, where it seals tight, but it doesn't get stuck.
This one is definitely not as hard to open. Even if I crank it down, it still opens nicely. So,
Rough Spirits, Marshall, thanks for joining. I see that mod icon, so I guess he's probably watching on your channel. Thank you. It's always nice to be recognized for our visual appearance on a mostly audio podcast. At least I imagine most people are putting this on in the background and not actually watching our faces.
I can't blame them either.
Yeah, because who wants to stare at us, really?
Oh.
How's that rum cask finish opening up? Great. It's beautiful. I think it's not one of those bottles that I mean, I've only had it open for a couple of months, but it's not one of those bottles that changes dramatically as it has more air. Like in the glass, I think it opens up a bit, but I think in the bottle as is, it shows really well. So I loved it when I first opened it. I love it now. It's I can open a fresh bottle and like compare them. I don't know. I'm not going to do that tonight, but it's probably something I'll do at some point in the next couple of months.
That's a cool idea. Spencer, yes, I agree. The holiday screw cap's boring, but yes, they are effective. They do the trick.
All right, so back to the topic, maybe.
Yeah, why not?
And we can decide what the topic is. But feel free, like, if anybody has questions about like the regulation, what it means, where it came from. If you didn't watch the conversation last night, if you haven't listened to the One Nation Under Whiskey Roundtable with all the producers, if you didn't watch the Whiskey Vault live stream earlier, where all these, like, everybody's got a different take on these questions. So I'm hoping I can give you my take, especially if you didn't watch our live last night. The quarter turn screw cap is kind of nice. So is that on the holiday, or what bottle is that you mean? I kind of get what you mean. I just wonder what bottle you're talking about. But anyway, so this definition that I have up on screen right now. So getting back on topic. Yeah, Ben. Okay, that's what Ben Holiday uses. Okay, cool. All right, so getting back on topic. So what I had on screen was, this is AmericanSingleMaltWhiskey.org, and they set forth their proposed definition in non-legal English of what they think that this should be. And these technical details that are here, this stuff about, I mean, mash, distilled, and matured in the United States of America sounds like technical details, but that's actually really important. That's saying this is a product this is a product of the United States from beginning to end. Everything except potentially the grain. And the reason that they didn't include the grain in this point is because a lot of these distillers, especially the ones that are making peated American single malt whiskey, they're actually getting their barley from Scotland. And there's enough really important American single malts that would get left out of the definition if they required American barley. At least what we know is that there are not a lot of American malting houses that are willing to work with peat, because most of those malting houses are malting for beer. Right. And that's the other thing, Jason. McCarthy's is worth this exception in and of itself, in my humble opinion. I mean, clearly I have a relationship with that brand. I've done a barrel pick with them. I'm friends with the distillers, the former master distiller, Joseph O'Sullivan, who's now at Minden Mill, who just released today. They just announced their American single malt whiskey. That happened today. Funny story about that. I saw that post go by on Instagram, and I immediately texted Joe, "Congratulations on finally releasing that Minden Mill American single malt." And he's like, "What? I didn't know we announced that."
Whoops.
So he was on the bottling line because it's holiday season, and they're rushing to get these bottles ready for the market, right? Clearly Minden Mill's media account was like, "Oh, it's ratification day. We have to announce this today. We can't wait like the extra day or two, whatever it was that they were planning, because they're in the middle of bottling this product." They announced it today because how could you not, right? And so Joe didn't know they were going to do that. Apparently, at least he didn't know they were going to do it at that time of day on that particular day. So that was kind of fun, where like a couple hours later, he called me and was like, "You broke that news to me." That's what he said.
I mean, a little feather in your hat.
So I thought that was fun. But yeah, so clearly I have a relationship with McCarthy's, but it is important to note that the American Single Malt Whiskey Commission acknowledges McCarthy's as a particularly special whiskey, because this thing that they say on their bottles, let me solo my face so you can see the bottle zoomed in. The first American Single Malt Whiskey into barrel in 1994, the earliest that anybody knows about for an American Single Malt Whiskey. And the commission has, they certainly have given lip service to this point, but I believe that they have really put in the homework, that they tried to find if there was anybody earlier than that. And as far as they know, in the 8 to 9 years that American Single Malt Whiskey Commission has been a thing, they have not been able to find anyone who did it earlier than McCarthy's. So at this point, they're all very well convinced McCarthy's is the first American single malt. And so it would be a damn shame if the legal definition of the category left them out.
My research as well pointed towards McCarthy's being the first to put in barrel American single malt and to put in bottle American single malt. So
yeah, that of course is all coming from like public documentation, right? So
yes.
I think the producers themselves have an advantage there, where they can all sort of in the commission share their records from as early as they were making American single malt and say, "Hey, this is the earliest we put single malt into barrel," and kind of figure it out that way. Not necessarily public information.
I would have to caveat that by saying something like our current time or post prohibition or something like that, because I can only imagine that as immigrants came over, early, baby steps of the Americas, that malted barley was the thing that they made whiskey from, because that's what they made it from where they were from, right? So when they came here, they found barley, they malted barley, they made spirit. I would assume that happened. Now, obviously, I don't know, and I can't really find any record of solely just 100% malted barley one place, but records weren't kept very well back then either. So
that is true.
Overland Drams, Hogsback. That's an obscure distillery. My guess is there's very, very few people that know about them and have, let alone have tried their stuff. I found Hogsback, a single malt, actually very, very enjoyable, and would like to find where I can get some of that. Short of going to, I believe Hogsback is in Colorado, if I'm not mistaken, there and getting some. But a friend of mine has sent me a couple samples of some of their stuff, and it's very, very enjoyable.
StreamYard is telling me my connection is unstable, so let me know if anybody's having a hard time understanding me. So I'll see what I can do to figure it out. I'm on Ethernet and everything, so I'm not sure.
Hey, Donald.
Yeah, so I'm gonna bring that back up. Some good comments here. Spencer Mav says, I have a question. Why are we telling people about American Single Malt whiskey? I want to keep it my little secret because everything else is disappearing for me. Yeah, I will admit, there's been a few ways in which I've had like let's say bittersweet feelings about this, right? Like first of all, this is fantastic that we've got the regulation. Like I just want to I have a tendency to just skip over the part where I'm happy and just explain the issues. But we're fucking stoked. This goes without saying. This is amazing that this is finally happening. We have the legal type regulation for American single malt whiskey. That means the category has legitimacy it didn't have before. Now people can't say oh, you're just funky bourbon that's made from malt whiskey, right? Like Europeans or whatever. There was words to that effect. I recommend watching the One Nation Under Whiskey roundtable with the American Single Malt Whiskey Commission that they released earlier today. Because they have comments along those lines, like how hard it is to convince Europeans or even American whiskey producers and stores and bars and restaurants that American single malt whiskey is a real thing that needs its own category, its own shelf, its own section on the menu. And that people are going to want to drink it. It's not like just some funny little experiment that's here today, gone tomorrow. It's like, this is really a real thing. It has a regulation that says what it is and what it isn't, and it's here to stay. Yeah. All those conversations just got a lot easier. So right. Yes, Spencer, there is the other side of that where oh shit, this has been a poorly kept secret for a long time, and now it's not a secret at all anymore, which means that frankly, for lack of a better term, the taters are going to move in.
Well, and I've had that thought for some time, and then lo and behold, Jack Daniel's releases an American single malt.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, so now we can keep the good stuff secret, and all these big mass producers can put out mediocre stuff, and the taters will go after that because it's a name they already know. And forgive me for saying taters like it's a derogatory term, but
listen. The tater's
the brand hype,
and I have waited in line for Scotch before. Okay, so just because I'm not a bourbon tater doesn't make me not a tater. Sometimes
Scotch has taters too.
Yeah. I can't say I've ever been a American single malt whiskey tater, although I will say the closest I've ever come is the first American single malt whiskey advent that I did, 2021, which was while we were waiting for TTB to take these words and make them into a proposal for the category. That was the first time I did American Single Malt Whiskey Advent in 2021. And I did not have 24, let alone 27, because I did the real Sunday to like whatever it was, 4 Sundays before Christmas to Christmas. It happened to be 27 days of Advent that year. I didn't have 24 American Single Malt whiskeys on my shelf in bottles and samples, anything. I had like 13. In a recent video, I showed the spreadsheet that I did where I was like literally writing down when I got the samples that I ended up reviewing later in the month. I ended the month with like 35 samples, but I had to like go talk to everyone I knew in the whiskey community. Hey, what American Single Malt whiskeys do you have? I don't have that. Can I have a sample? And one of the things I did that made this is the closest I've ever been to being an American Single Malt whiskey tater was I drove to Hood River, Oregon from Seattle, 4-hour drive basically, on Saturday, December 12th or something like that, like middle of my Advent, to go buy the 6-year PX release, or maybe the PX release wasn't coming out yet, but like to buy the 6-year McCarthy's that I didn't have yet in person, because they didn't have it in the stores. It had like just released like a week earlier or something like that. They didn't have it in the stores in Seattle yet. So I was like, I need this to be in my Advent. I need it. I have a fierce need. And I drove 4 hours there and 4 hours back to buy a single bottle of whiskey. And I also bought a couple other bottles too. So I'm like, hey, I don't have enough American Single Malts to put in my Advent. So I'm going to put three new McCarthy's in my Advent. Yay.
Yeah. That doesn't sound too tatery to me. I mean, I drive 4 hours to go, to a liquor store just because I haven't been to that one yet or whatever. But,
that's why I say it's the closest I've ever been to.
I get that. I like Jason's comment here. Can we call Scotch taters taties? Tatties.
Getting a little close to something we probably shouldn't say on air.
So that screen you were sharing there, Doug.
It is a great day trip. I love driving through the gorge. Like there could be much worse day trips, right? Like I have driven from Dallas. So the first interview I ever did was with Jared Himstedt at Balcones. It was like August 2nd or something, like 2 or 3 days after TTB published their proposal in 2022. And I drove from Dallas, where I was visiting my in-laws, to Waco, which is a 2-hour drive, not that bad, for an interview that Jared was kind enough to give me with 1 day's notice. Now that drive, it's only 2 hours, but it feels like freaking forever because there's nothing. Texas is flat, mostly flat prairie. It's kind of hill country-ish out there, but it's still just like cows, grass, hay bales, and the road does a little bit of this, but mostly it's just flat and there's nothing at all to see. There's no mountains. It's mostly like yellow and dry in the middle of the summer. Like there's just nothing to see. That is an awful drive. I've had to make that drive in the middle of the night once because I went to school in Austin. I grew up. I spent like 16 years of my life in Texas. And I was driving from Austin or from Dallas, where I think I was visiting in-laws. I don't know. It doesn't matter why I was in Dallas. I was driving from Dallas to Austin at like 10 p.m.
Yes.
And you get the highway hypnosis so bad. There's no lights on the road. You get your headlights and the reflectors on the road is all you get. There's less than nothing to see because there's no silhouette of the horizon changing. It's just a flat, just a terrible drive. Anyway, enough about that. Oh, good Lord, we're talking Texas whiskey. Hey, Balcones is an important part of the American Single Malt Whiskey Commission. Jared Himstedt is the vice president, and Balcones makes great whiskey. Look, I know that palates vary, right? Like on a given day, Balcones is not necessarily my favorite.
Don't buy into this guy. He just likes talking trash about Texas whiskey because he didn't like one of them.
Listen, the reason we do live is because I'm easy to provoke. But like in a nice way. Yeah. So yeah, that drive through the gorge is great. There are much worse drives. Driving from Dallas to Austin is one of those worst drives.
So back to the topic.
Back
The
to the
screen you
top.
posted up.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that one. That is oddly similar to the proposed definitions. Is that what that actually is? And then
So
not
this,
the
yeah, this is what so the American Single Malt Whiskey Commission has not
yeah
changed what they wrote here. This was what they proposed to the
in
government
16.
in 2016.
Yeah.
They put up this website. They have. By the way, getting ahead of a question that is sure to come up, and we'll touch on it again. If you want to know what whiskey brands you should be looking at to find really good American single malt whiskey, like it's not a perfect list, it's not a top 10 list, but what you can do is you can go to this website, americansingle-malt-whiskey.org, and you can. Oh, they've changed their homepage.
Yeah, they did. It should be in here somewhere though.
It's probably under about. Yeah, here it is. So on the about page, you've got the founding members. These are going to be like Balcones, Great American. Wow. Okay. Balcones, Great American Single Malt Whiskey. Copperworks, Great American Single Malt Whiskey. Few Spirits. They don't really make American Single Malt anymore, but what they had was really good.
Yeah.
Santa Fe Spirits, Great American Single Malt Whiskey. Triple Eight Distillery, Nantucket. That's the Notch. Great American Single Malt Whiskey. Very expensive, but the people who like it love it. Virginia Distillery Company. If anything, the opposite. They've got great whiskey, but it's actually on the cheap side. Westland Distillery, another one that's kind of on the expensive side, but they are really innovative. We could talk about the innovations that they're doing. I think it's hard to give a wide-reaching discussion of American single malt whiskey and not talk at length about what Westland is doing innovation-wise. Westward, really unique, really good whiskey. My shelf confirms it. I've got like 15 bottles from them. And like, yes, that's because I'm in their quarterly whiskey club, but I have never wanted to cancel an order.
So here's a question, and leave this list up. So
Sure.
There's 8 founding members there. Yes, is that right? 9.
9. Yeah.
9. Okay. How many of those 9 do you have something on your shelf from? In a single malt, in an ASM.
So should we include samples or not?
No, full bottle.
Full bottle. I don't have a few single malt. I do have a few bourbon though.
Okay.
I don't have head frame spirits, and I don't have a full bottle of 888. Everything else
Okay.
I have.
All right. So I have one on that list that I do not have a bottle of.
Okay.
Which
Which one
one
is that?
And it's head frame. I haven't
Frame,
been
okay.
able to get a head frame yet. And I think that head frame is the Kelly is what it's called, if I'm not mistaken. But
Cool.
I have heard pretty darn good things about it. So and then scrolling down a little farther.
And like, don't stop at the founding members, right? Because
Right.
there's great stuff down here, and like in no particular order, I'm just going to highlight a couple that I happen to see. Andalusia Whiskey Company, great whiskey. Lost Lantern Whiskey is an independent bottler. They do great stuff. I know Germ is a fan of Bird Creek.
Yes, absolutely.
And Lost Woods, and so am I. Haven't had them on the show yet, but want to. And Germ and I are going to co-interview if our schedules work out. So that'll be fun. Monotoni, I actually, in a sense, I have some of that because I think it's behind me. Let me find it. I have a blend.
Been able to have yet too.
I have a blend from Crowded Barrel that has Monotoni in it.
Oh, okay.
So it's Hydra. That was Daniel's blend, the last one he did before he split from Crowded Barrel. No need to go grab it. If you know it, you know it. If you don't, you can't buy it anyway unless you go to their tasting room, and I think they're sold out. So, because they were almost sold out a year ago when I was there. Let's see, Minden Mill Distilling. They must be a recent addition to this list because that
must be very updated because that was they
didn't even have that name until like a year and a half ago or earlier this year.
I can tell you as of 3 months ago that was not on this list.
Yeah, Boulder Spirits. Should I zoom in more here? Boulder Spirits. Mm-hmm. These guys are great.
Boston Harbor Distillery. The name Boston Harbor Distillery is not the name on their bottles. So that, if I remember correctly, that is Putnam Single Malt.
Okay.
That's pretty good stuff. That's definitely one not to steer clear of.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
sorry. We missed some comments go by. Yeah. VDC is the VDC line from VDC is almost the most inexpensive single malt that you can buy at $45 a bottle. The Courage and Conviction series is like circa $100 a bottle. That's a little on the pricey side, but it's not the most egregious pricing of American single malt whiskey. So,
no,
especially when you keep in mind the quality of the casks they're using, the fact that they hit a $45 price point on the VDC line and they're still quality casks, it's like that's a mark of maturity of the category, the distillery certainly, and I think the category, because when you have distilleries that are starting to put out loss leaders, right, stuff that's easy to buy that gets you hooked on their product, that gets you in the online store, and then you see this other cool thing you want to buy, loss
yes,
leaders, they're making such slim margins on the VDC line, which is good news for you because you can get really good, really cheap American single malt whiskey. And
yes.
$45, calling $45 really cheap is like, it's a relative thing. But yeah.
But that is, I mean, realistically, in the American whiskey world, and across every category, yes, there's $30 bottles, there's sub $30 bottles.
Yeah.
But for the most part, you walk into a liquor store and buy one bottle, you're not walking out of there for less than 50, 60 bucks.
Right.
I mean, for the most
So
part. Obviously, there is an exception.
yeah,
But
so I'll add just a call to the audience. If you know of American single malt whiskey for less than $45, I want to hear about it. One that I know is Balcones Lineage, usually comes in around $35 to $38. Also really good whiskey. I don't have a full bottle of that one, but I have tried it. And I think it does really well for that price point, right? So yeah, Lineage. If you know of any others that come in under $45, tell me about them.
that
Blue
bear
Peak from
fight,
Stranahan's is $45.
the bear fight was less than 40. I think that was like
Okay.
36 or 38.
Okay. So
But not
Bear
good.
Fight.
I mean, not good.
Yeah. And then that's
In
the
my
other
opinion.
thing. So,
And that's my opinion.
right. So first of all, I want to know, without a value judgment, which ones exist. And the second thing I want to know is, did you think it was good? Because most people I've talked to, and I'm not going to name names because they wouldn't want me to, most people I've talked to in the industry who I've asked, do you know of American single malt that's less than $45? I want to put it on a list. They said, yes, but it's not something I'd want to drink. Right. Or like, no, but if it is, I doubt that it would be something I'd want to drink because barley is expensive and making good American single malt whiskey is expensive. Pot stills are not terribly efficient from a alcohol yield for raw ingredients perspective. Right. So there's something to be said for like, once you get below a certain price point, you're probably not getting good liquid anymore. So that $45 price point, from what I've seen, is pretty much the bare minimum for quality whiskey. Balcones comes in a little bit lower than that. It's still quality, but there is a distinct difference between the $38 Lineage and the $55 or $50 Texas One single malt. There's a distinct difference in quality between those.
I think Lineage, and I've said this a couple times, I think Lineage is the best product that Balcones puts out regularly.
Really?
And
like in terms of consistency or in terms of like absolute best taste?
just being a quality product. So it's fantastic. I think it's a fantastic single malt. I think it fits what I like out of American single malt the most, out of what Balcones does, and it's inexpensive. So you get that little trifecta going on there. Quality spirit put into a cask, quality stuff put into a bottle, tastes good, and price point is good. I think that's a winner all the way around for me. Obviously, yeah, I know there's some differences in what they do with their Mirador and their
right. So Corey has a great point. So I'm in Seattle area where we have the 3-tier system makes everything 20% more expensive than it would be anywhere else. And we pay 20.5% liquor tax. And we pay like a $3 something cents per liter tax on spirits. So when someone tells me this bottle's $45, I'm already doing the math in my head. That's going to cost me like $63 out the door. Right. When you go to Westland Distillery and buy in person, their final price for the $150 category, the Solum, Caleri, and Gariana, the those $150 whiskeys out the door, it's 178, I think, after you've added all the taxes. And it's made in Seattle, so they're not adding that 20% because it came in from another state. But like something like Balcones, it started at $50. By the time I'm done buying it, it's $68. So that's just, on the other hand, I'm a software engineer by trade. That's why I live in Seattle. And Seattle has no state, Washington has no state income tax. So the place I'm paying my taxes is an alcohol tax, and I just have to make peace with that at some point. But yeah, San Diego, same deal, right? Like the taxes and just everything being expensive there, and the highest state income tax and blah, blah, blah. Like, yeah, there are certain states where things just cost a lot. Old Line's flagship malt is $45. Great to know. I've heard great things about Old Line, but I haven't had it personally. I know that Jake from Coming Whiskey really likes them. Oak and Grist, I have tasted samples, 2 different samples from them. They were both phenomenal. Oak and Grist is in North Carolina. They were hit really hard by the recent hurricane, like a month or 2 ago. And they ship to most places in the United States. So, I mean, like, I don't think marketing on a sob story is a great thing, but I'm saying as an independent person, think about what happened to them and take my recommendation that it's really good whiskey and go buy some whiskey from them to support them so they can rebuild and get back to a good place.
Brooklyn, fantastic. Yes. It is
Brooklyn. Yeah. Is it pronounced Brooklyn or Brooklyn? It's Brooklyn.
Okay. So funny you ask. Okay. So I pronounce this Brooklyn. Okay. Just the way I read it, the way I see it, that's how I pronounce it. The owner of the company, if you ask him how to pronounce that, he doesn't know either. So
nice.
His answer was, I don't know. So pronounce it Brooklyn, pronounce it Brooklyn, however you like. The word itself comes from the Danish language. And now I can't remember what it means because this was well over a year ago that I did the research to talk to the distillery. But excellent single malt whiskey. They only make and put out a 10-year-old product. That is all they do. And it is not under $45.
Yep. Shout out to Hinterhouse. Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Hinterhouse.
Very good.
So according to the Whiskey Shaman, who has also done an interview with Hinterhouse recently, it is not pronounced Hinterhouse. And I believe Nate did not contest that fact. I don't know if he agreed with it necessarily. Maybe he did. I just don't remember. So apparently not Hinterhouse, maybe Hinterhouse. So that I learned from watching the Whiskey Shaman. And if you don't watch the Whiskey Shaman, you should. It's a great show.
Yeah, absolutely.
Also to answer the question, I probably did answer the question, but to answer the question, why is Washington so expensive? 3-tier system is a problem, but it's not the whole problem. The biggest problem, and there's a story behind that. So Washington used to be a control state. When they moved from being a control state to being a state that's not a control state, there were additional taxes put into place in the 3-tier system. That's one reason liquor is expensive in Washington. The reason Washington in general is really expensive is because this is an extremely liberal state, fiscally liberal, that has in its state constitution that there cannot be a state income tax. So they tax the hell out of everything else. The property taxes have itemized taxes for every little thing. We're always voting on a new tax because they don't have a graduated income tax. They just have property taxes and sales taxes. So this is the state that we live in, and there's basically no way to change it.
Deer Hammer, yes.
Yeah, Deer Hammer.
Heard some great things about Deer Hammer. 10th Mountain, of course.
Yep. So yeah, Colorado, 10th Mountain, Stranahan's, Boulder.
Here's one nobody talks about: Peach Street. They make a single malt.
What's the other one? They have a bottle. It was one of the bottled and bonds that I called out a while back. Why can't I remember?
Out of Colorado?
Yeah, from Colorado. I think it's somewhere back there on my shelf, but I can't see it.
Well, it wouldn't be Boulder.
No. God, why can't I remember?
You talk about that.
Oh, geez. Okay, dead air. Let's move on. So yeah, Oak and Grist we talked about. Old Line Spirits we talked about. I've had a sample of Keschel. That's Virginia. So my usual co-host Phil is the guy who runs the annual Virginia whiskey tournament, and he's not necessarily focused on American Single Malt. He's kind of all American whiskey. Anything that's Virginia, anything that's rye, that's kind of his focus. But Keschel makes Cashel, It's one of those. It's like a Gallic word. So like think Scotch when you're pronouncing that. And they make a single malt that's really good. They fly under the radar. By the way, we were talking about Brooklyn. We got hung up on how it's pronounced. Brook Ellen Distilling, really good single malt. I think it appeals more to a bourbon drinker's palate, which I like. I straddle the line between bourbon and Scotch. So like any kind of American single malt is good for me. I just like to call out there's some American single malts that are more Scotch like and some that are more bourbon like. And I think Brook Ellen is more bourbon like, but they do lots of good work with finishes. So if you like finished bourbon, you're going to like finished American single malt from Brook Ellen.
So
Also,
I only
speaking
have
of
their.
New York, go ahead.
Wait a minute. No, maybe I'm on the wrong. I am. I'm in the wrong place. Brookellen does not do the 10-year stuff. Brookellen is the 77.
Yes.
Okay, now I agree with what you're saying.
Okay.
I'm thinking Finger Lakes, which is
Oh yeah, Finger Lakes.
is the Mackenzie single malt. That's all they do is the 10-year Mackenzie single malt.
Also, oh, was there a rebrand on Brook Ellen's website? I don't know. I'm not gonna go check right now.
Well, they
like they changed the name or just how it looks?
no that and I'm thinking about somebody else's too because New York Distilling just recently moved, and I would assume that they rebranded after they moved. But that's still not Brookellen.
Yeah, so New York, as long as we're in New York Distillery is great. They make a single malt. I have tried very little of their products, but what I've had impressed me.
Yes.
And because they're so far on the other coast and I don't know anybody there, I don't have a connection to Kings County yet. So I haven't scheduled them for an interview, but they're on my I have a lot of versions of shortlists, I guess, but I would say they're like in my top 10 next. I'd like to have them on the podcast if I can get a connection. Oh, okay. New bottle and no ASM on their website now. Highly interesting.
And this is Brookellen.
This is Brook Allen. That's what he's referring to.
Interesting. All right.
Yeah, I don't know. Okay, so Bullet. So of course everybody knows Bullet, right? Bullet bourbon, Bullet rye, mostly MGP source stuff. As I understand from last night, Germ, Bullet is sourcing Stitzel Weller American single malt.
Stitzel Weller juice, yeah.
So that's kind of cool.
And that is not a confirmed statement. That's not 100%. I'm 100% accurate on it. That's it. It's a friend of mine works for Diageo. Diageo owns Stitzel Weller, also owns Bullet.
Mm-hmm.
And it is. We were playing the 20 questions guessing game as to who actually made the stuff, and he said, "You said it within the first three, things that you guessed." And then he added that it was one of the oldest distilleries. So,
right,
that is what I'm left thinking, that it's going to be Stitzel Weller. So.
I just remembered that I haven't been watching the Instagram comments at all, and I should. We currently have no live viewers on Instagram, so that's fine. But we had some hype come in, so I just wanted to call that out. There's lots of like hell yes and let's go's kind of going on.
Yeah, Corey, I'm just seeing your comment now. Kings County is fantastic. But everything from Kings County is fantastic. Their single malt is really, really good, which they should be releasing another batch of single malt here shortly. They haven't made one or put one out for a few years, but they have some 5-6-year-old casks sitting there.
Dan says the Whiskey Punkard says that Old Line might be under 50. I'll have to check. That would be good to know. So yeah, Dan, Bullet's a never buy for me as well. I like there's too much good original juice out there to be buying sourced stuff. And as you say in your other comment, they have had some history of business practices and also HR practices, frankly.
I totally agree with you. Since my friend works for the parent company of them, he had said to me, "You really need to try it. You really need to go out and buy it." It wasn't that expensive. I think it was like $60.
The Bullet single malt. Yeah.
Yes.
I believe I have a sample somewhere.
I was super
I want to try before I buy a whole bottle.
surprised with how good it was. Is it fantastic? Is it the best? No, absolutely not. But I went into it with very, very low expectations, and was very pleasantly surprised with what it was. So for whatever that's worth to you.
Just I want to talk about Boulder just a little bit more. So Boulder has, I mean, shit. Let's just go to their website.
There we go. Are you 21, Doug?
No, totally, totally. I've been doing a whiskey podcast for a year and a half, and I just happen to be under 21. No, thank you. I am flattered that you think I'm that young. But can you see this gray streak that I have, which I actually kind of like?
Oh, I thought you did that on purpose.
No, it's I just have this one little patch of gray hair that's been growing out of my forehead for years, and it got really bushy recently. How do I switch back? Okay, so
the beard for me has turned gray very badly, and
so Boulder has not one, not two, but 7 American single malts currently listed on their shop website. Boulder is
some of those are
the same style stuff,
just different finishing, and
yes.
I think maybe there's a bottle and bond. Yes.
Yeah.
I can't read that stuff.
Yeah. But. So, and I also want to point out, like, I got so my story with Boulder is fun. In a sense, they've given me some free stuff, but what actually happened was I went to an auction at ACSA in February in 2024, a silent auction, and Boulder had donated a 6-pack of Stock Your Bar, and it was meant to be bourbon, American single malt, vodka, gin, whatever. And Ryan Negley of Boulder Spirits had been the one to invite me to ACSA in the first place, so I had his contact. I won this silent auction. I spent, I think, $130 on what is added up. I mean, it was going to be less, right? I think what they listed on the silent auction was that it was like a $280 value or something like that. I ended up spending $130. For some reason, nobody bid on it. I was the only one. So it was like $130. And then I went to Ryan. I was like, well, I want to have you on my podcast anyway. Could I just like pay extra to upgrade all of these to single malt? Cause I don't need the gin and the vodka and whatever. Right. And he was like, yeah, sure. No problem. But don't pay extra. Just take them. So I paid $130 and I got 6 bottles of American single malt, basically out of an upgrade from it. And then later Ryan sent me, a bottle of the Leave No Trace. I had the point that I'm trying to make is I had no idea what these cost, like, ever, until I looked them up because I was writing a review like 8 months later. I thought they were all going to be like really close to $100, like 80, 90, $100, depending on the bottle. They're all $75 or lower. It's a mind-boggling value, and I say that because I had no idea. I genuinely thought they would be more expensive. The fact that any of these was the peated malt is $59. Go buy that shit right now.
Yeah, I mean, and it's good.
It's really, really good stuff.
Yeah,
really good stuff. Yeah, the basic Boulder American single malt in the new American oak, $55, and this is a bourbon drinker's American single malt. There's no finish; it's just new oak, but it's soft with it. So I like Boulder as an introduction to American single malt whiskey when you're coming from bourbon, because it'll introduce you to the malt flavor, the softer oak influence. That's all there. And then you can also explore, they've got a bottled and bond 4-year. They've got a bottled and bond 7-year. They have the special series, the series that the 10 Essentials that's still there and the Leave No Trace come from. Both of these are great whiskeys. The 10 Essentials is criminally underpriced. It's 49.5% because it's mostly water. Hey, look, I have my bottle. So the rest of you,
screw the rest of you guys. Buy now.
Yeah, buy now. Buy it now. Bin. The $63 for the 10 Essentials, don't sleep on that. The $59 for the peated malt, don't sleep on that. These are really, really good whiskeys. And the Leave No Trace, 53.5%. It's not cask strength, but it's getting up there. It's got like 10% of it is peated malt, so it's got just an edge of peat to it. So if you're a cask strength bourbon drinker and you want to try an American single malt with just a hint of peat that's got that really punchy flavor, Leave No Trace is the bottle for you. And it's only $75. I mean, like, I know that's starting to sound high, but like that should be $100 plus just on quality. So anyway, sorry.
That's a fair point.
I ended up making this a marketing bit for Boulder, but
Hey,
Like,
you know what? Realistically, there's certain companies that deserve it. You know,
yeah, I think
Boulder
Boulder
being one of
for
them.
attention. The reason I want to call out Boulder is because I feel like Boulder doesn't get enough attention because they live in the shadow of Stranahan's most of the time.
Everybody in Colorado lives in the shadow of Stranahan's, and
Yep.
it's hard to come out of that shadow. And really, Stranahan's is good. I mean, there's not a thing wrong with Stranahan's. Stranahan's is excellent whiskey.
I also love Stranahan's, absolutely. But
Um,
Stranahan's is a huge marketing beast. They're part of Proximo. They're all
yes,
over the place. They're in every store ever. Everybody's heard of Stranahan's.
but here's the thing: with all of that comes they stay in their lane. They make
That is true.
yellow label. They make 10-year. Now they're releasing a 12-year. They make they discontinued the best one they had, which was the original Diamond Peak black
Yep.
label.
Yeah,
But now
that
they
showed
brought
up
it
in our blind
back.
sample showdown. Blew my pants off.
Yeah. They brought black label back, the Diamond Peak, but now it's a short finish on a 6-year yellow label.
Yep.
And it's different every year.
Yep. Different
But
finishes.
for the most part, they stay in their lane. They make what they make, and they don't vary. Whereas Boulder, i.e., 7 different versions of a single malt on their webpage right now, they're gonna make what they want to make, and it's gonna change on a regular basis, which keeps it interesting, keeps people interested and excited about trying new things from them. Whereas Stranahan's and this is a funny thing because Stranahan's has gone through some label changes.
Yep.
Their new label has the square paper on the bottom. I have nothing of that new label except for a couple single casts. I have 2 single casts. Everything else from Stranahan's I have is still a very old label because there's, obviously this is discontinued, but there isn't much change.
I have the Diamond Peak over there too. Hang on.
Yeah, I mean, I got a bunch of them there, and that one was easy to reach. But what I'm getting at is the distilleries that are going to explore and experiment and do different stuff and put them out. That's who I'm excited about, because you don't get the same stuff every time you go buy it. If I want the same stuff every time I go buy it, hate to say it, but I'll just stick with bourbon.
Yeah. Word. Feel that. So first of all, Jason, for reasons I'm not going to put up that comment, but I accept. We'll talk offline. So let's see. Old Line. We got something about Old Line. So we're talking about New Riff in the chat. That kind of went by while we weren't talking about it. So New Riff Sour Mash American Single Malt. I have not tried it yet, but David Thomas Tao loves the New Riff American Single Malts. I want to try both editions. There's been 2 so far. So I'm going to be trying to find samples.
Well, I can get you a sample of the first one. I'm not going to buy the second one.
Fair enough. Okay, cool. But I appreciate that. And I think I know someone who has the second one, so we'll figure that out. I like the idea that so we talk about big bourbon producers. Yeah, so Ryan Legend is saying basically my point, right? New Riff is really new charred oak heavy because they are essentially a bourbon producer. But what's nice is that this is a bourbon producer that has a big name within at least enthusiast circles, does a really good job of marketing to the masses, and they aren't Beam or Jack or Bullet or whatever other name your big brand bourbon. I still want to see Wild Turkey put out an American Single Malt. That would be amazing, but I don't know if they will.
For me, it's Maker's Mark. I would love to see Maker's Mark put out a single malt.
Yep.
I just, for whatever reason, and maybe it's just the way that they spell whiskey, I just feel like they would do a banger job of making a quote unquote big brand American Single Malt.
Yeah, now I don't know what this comment was about, and I am curious. I applaud the copywriters that sold the hell out of it. but the blend, was this about the new riff ASM?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, OG Dive and Peak. I mean, yeah, like I said, great. If they used more ex bourbon instead of new charred oak, it would have been better. That's what Ryan Legend is saying.
Yes.
There's a
Agreed.
lot of various wine casks in there competing on the palate. Yeah. So here's my problem with, I'm very sensitive to tannins. Like I don't hate them, but it stands out to me. And if it just crosses the line into too much for my palate, it goes from being something I can tolerate to something I hate. Um, when you put new charred oak and red wine casks together, you get too much tannin for me. I think that's probably true for a lot of people.
Yeah, I'll go with that.
Yeah, 291. That's another Colorado distillery. I didn't know they made an American single malt whiskey. I found out at ACSA. It's really good.
I would like to get some. I don't know if it's still available, if they do this regularly, or if this was a project just several years ago and it's going to be impossible to find it. But it's the E bottle is what it is. Yeah, and I didn't know that either until just the other day, actually, when they posted something about the rules here. So
Yeah, Jason, I suspect I won't love the new Riff single malt, but I think it's an important enough brand that people have been talking about the single malt that I,
yeah,
as a person who focuses almost 100% on American single malt, I should have an opinion from having tasted it. And until I taste it, I'm not going to write it off. I have been surprised before, right? Like Boulder, all new charred oak, they are killing it.
yeah. Marshall, yes, go Randall, awesome. And Willet making a single malt. I would buy it. I would try it. Absolutely, I would. I am a fan of Willet, so I would try their single malt. I don't know as if they would hit my preferences as to like what I say is really, really good and I would buy again and again. But I could imagine they would make a good whiskey.
So Del Bach, yeah, we haven't gotten to that in walking down the list yet, or were they at the top? Hang on.
I think it's in alphabetical order, except I think it's split left and right.
Yeah, except the founding members.
Right.
Oh, Santa Fe's up here, but not Del Bach. Okay, so yeah, if we scroll down just a little bit more, we'll get to Del Bach, but we're skipping over a lot. But yeah, love Del Bach. Del Bach is great. I mean, they also are new charred oak, and they're in the high desert, and they age their stuff for like 11 months. Period. I didn't know that, and I tried like their entire line before I knew that, and it's shockingly mature for its 11 months old. It's really flavorful. It's unique with the mesquite smoke. Santa Fe also has the mesquite smoke, but their flavor profile is different. So even though there's two major makers of mesquite, I mean Andalusia too, right? So there's like three major makers of mesquite smoked single malt in the United States, which is mesquite smoked single malt is a unique thing to the United States of America. That's what the creativity of this category allows. So like that's awesome, right? We have a genuinely new way. Like there's peated whiskey, there's unpeated whiskey. Now there's mesquited whiskey, mesquited single malt. That's worth looking for. Del Bach is unique. It's really good. It's really flavorful. They do finishes exceptionally well as well.
Yeah.
Mark Viertaler has a really keen sensory palate evaluation regimen. And quality control is fantastic there. And he talks about sensory evaluation to target. He does like seminars and stuff where he talks about like how to make sure that even when you're a small craft distillery, you can hit your sensory goals for your products. I dare say a thought leader in the category, really talented staff at Del Bach. Not to leave out all the other distilleries that clearly also have talented staff, but I'm speaking from, I've been to his seminar and it's extremely thoughtful.
Yes, Jason, it'd be a purple top and it would be $700. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Foggy Burl. There's one to talk about. Redwood Empire and their Foggy Burl. Have you had that, Doug?
I have not.
Okay.
I've heard mixed opinions.
I can package a sample up with you with that new riff with that in it as well. Again, another one that you need to try for a point of reference. This one you may like more.
Okay.
I don't know as if you're going to say, "Oh, I love it," but you may like it a lot more than the new riff one, judging by what you just said about the overly tannic.
Yep. Okay. A Delbach and Cedar Ridge collab. Hell yeah.
Here's what Delbach Cedar Ridge, cool. I would
Malt?
like to see a collab with almost anybody.
Yeah, all of these American single malt whiskey producers
Absolutely.
sharing barrels and styles and doing some kind of a blend. Now, that's one thing. If we're actually getting into like, we're here to talk, I mean, Ratification Day, yay, American single malt's a category. What did they leave out? Blend of American single malt whiskeys was not defined. So things like the Lost Lantern vatted malt
However,
is just a blend of straight whiskeys. But
yes.
that's okay.
So, however, as in, so we know that if you're a straight rye whiskey on the label, it has to be, anything in that bottle has to be distilled in the same state. Doesn't have to be the same distillery, but it has to be distilled in the same state. Straight American single malt has to be distilled at the same distillery. So the state thing isn't a thing, but with like rye whiskey, it can be a blend of straight rye whiskeys that comes from multiple states.
Yes.
As long as they call it a blend of, and the blend, those were straight rye whiskeys. So I think with that said, we can have a blend of straight American single malt whiskeys without any rules needing to be, added, changed, whatever. I think it just fits into what we have, right?
So the previous factoring of the rules, I think we talked a little bit about this last night, where they used to define straight as a separate paragraph that could be applied to any type of whiskey. They've changed it all to a table that explicitly enumerates the types of whiskey.
Yes.
And the straight types are called out as separate lines. And this rule that's been added for American single malt whiskey. Oh, so and blended, both straight and blended. Straight was definitely a different paragraph. Blended was not. Blended was already enumerated. This one doesn't enumerate the blended thing. I don't know. I've been talking about this for like 3 days straight, and I'm losing coherence. I apologize.
Right. I do know what you're saying. Yes. So blended malt whiskey, blended rye whiskey, blended bourbon, those are all specific sections of that table, as well as straight bourbon, straight rye whiskey, straight malt whiskey. Those are all separate sections on that table. So but if I take 6 whiskeys and when I buy them, they're straight rye whiskeys, and I blend them together, I can call it a blend of straight rye whiskeys on the label. So
I think they should be able to do the same thing. I think they'll probably get away with it. So
yes, I think they'll get away with it.
I won't attribute this comment, but one of the comments I've heard from a producer has been that TTB, so asterisk, TTB ultimately is people that are making decisions subjectively to some extent, based in the fact of law, but to some extent subjectively, about whether they will approve a label or deny a label. This whole thing we were talking about yesterday, Germ, about how like the phrase American single malt whiskey with no breaks, no additions, no changes to the American blah, blah, blah. The letter of the law says if it's an American single malt whiskey claiming the type American single malt whiskey, the label has to say American single malt whiskey somewhere on it.
Right.
TTB may allow substitution of region on the basis of these labels already exist. Everybody knows that's an American single malt whiskey. The COLA approval says it's an American single malt whiskey. Put it on the back label, whatever. There's probably going to be ways around the strict letter of the law that requires the front label to say American single malt whiskey, quote unquote. And along the same line of thoughts, it's very likely that it will be okay to take a bunch of American single malt whiskeys from different states, different distilleries, and put them into a blend and call it a blend of, say, like hypothetically, a blend of straight American single malt whiskeys. And there is every possibility that will pass the TTB. And like Ryan Negley says, I asked him, hey, why are you allowed to put American single malt whiskey on a single line on your bottle? And he said, I don't know. The lawyers kind of figured that out, and once TTB approves it, no takesies backsies. Was part of his answer, was his pithy answer, but the actual, like, I did a little bit of research, and basically the reason for this is because there's two ways to be American single malt whiskey prior to the ratification of the American single malt whiskey quote unquote category. One way is your whiskey distilled from a fermented mash of 100% malted barley, blah blah blah. Not great for marketing. The other way is your malt whiskey, because you aged in new charred oak, because malt whiskey means 51% malted barley at a minimum and aged in new charred oak, just like bourbon, just like rye. Malt whiskey was already on the books. And then the term American is just a region, and that's true. And single had no definition. So you can write the type malt whiskey on your label and then add extra words to the front, and that's fine. So you can be a malt whiskey and label in a single line American single malt whiskey, and you're fine. So that was true then. It's going to be true now, except that now the phrase American single malt whiskey has like legally protected standard of identity.
Correct. Okay, so there's a few comments that are really good here. So Marshall Rough Spirits asks, what finish in general works well on American single malt?
Yeah, great question.
Obviously,
I want to put up another comment from someone else in answer to that. Cedar Ridge old wine barrels with Delbach mash and weather. That sounds freaking amazing.
I mean, it does.
But yeah, what works well?
I like Overland's comment, ex-bourbon. I totally agree.
Yeah, ex-bourbon is great.
And
I don't know that
should be a full
ex-bourbon counts as a
maturation.
finish. Yeah,
no, that should be a full maturation. But I digress on that. But as far as finishing goes, I think realistically, it very, very much depends on the specific spirit, who makes the spirit, how heavy is the spirit, how light is the spirit, blah, blah, blah. So like obviously Cedar Ridge stuff works very well in many, many different finishes and very heavy finishes as well. So, I mean, he's very finish heavy. That's what he likes to do. And it works. His malt works really well for it. It comes out good. You know, obviously sherry is a very good finish for malt whiskey in general. Rum is a very good finish for malt whiskey in general, I think. I think when you start getting into some weird stuff, you might find different things. I particularly do not like port finished malt whiskeys. It's not my thing.
Yeah. I agree. I think port is a really good finish for bourbon, and it clashes with the natural sweetness of barley because it's sweet in a different way. I
think, yeah, I'll go with that.
However, the VDC port finish is actually really good. And I think that works because they started in ex-bourbon, and also because Amanda Beckwith is really good at sourcing excellent quality barrels, and she is she's a very talented blender. She's got that shit nailed down.
And again, I mean, it's variables everywhere. It variables in every step of the process, right?
So the answer is always it depends, and in Jason's comment, same as other malts, really is absolutely the answer. I think so. I agree. Yeah. Sherry works fantastically because sherry works great for malt. We know that very well from Scotch. I think the particularly sweeter varieties of sherry, PX in particular, or like Malaga, or what's the other one? Muscatel. Those sweet, really sweet syrupy styles of sherry work really well with a heavily peated malt. That's true in Scotch, and it's true in American single malt as well. The heavy peat goes well with heavy sweet sherry. There's only a few heavily peated single malts like McCarthy's in American single malts, like McCarthy's. McCarthy's with the PX finish, the orange bottle behind me there. Really, really, really good. That is PX. Still top.
PX is my
basically top of my list of American single malts, period.
The PX is my favorite of the two sherries that they have, is the PX and Oloroso. The PX is awesome. Yeah. So good. So since we're talking about Virginia, or you were just talking about Virginia, and we're talking about sherry, I'm going to do a little Virginia sherry cask.
I have the double cask reserve, which has some sherry in it, but...
and then Whiskey Punkard said MGP malt stockpiles have to be just depleting by the minute since the day started. Yeah, I'm totally going to agree with you on this. And then he follows it up with a Penelope single malt is on its way.
I made that prediction several months ago. I
I'm
agree
totally
with
with you. I think realistically, it's already out. It's just not labeled with Penelope. It's Yellowstone. It's an MGP malt whiskey put out by Yellowstone. It's horrible.
Yeah.
They can keep it, and everybody that rides the brand hype and that train, they can buy that stuff, and I'm happy to see it go.
Yep. So in actual fact, we know MGP is making American Single Malt. If anybody had any question, is that a supposition? No, we know for a fact people are sourcing
No.
MGP Single Malt.
Yeah, and they have been for some time.
Yeah. Yellowstone, for example, very well known example. So there was a question: did it say where the barley has to come from? Answer: no. Barley can come from anywhere. In fact, that was a really important part of what the standard doesn't say. So bringing back this, let me go to the homepage again. So bringing back this, mashed, distilled, and matured in the United States of America. What's interesting about that is what it doesn't say. It doesn't say that your barley has to come from the United States of America. So it doesn't say grown in, right? That's really important because there's a lot of, especially McCarthy's, prominent examples of American single malt whiskey that source their barley from Scotland. Boulder is actually one of those as well. Alistair Brogan, the founder of Boulder Spirits, is a Scot. And he wanted to make Scotch in America in an American whiskey way back before he was a member of the American Single Malt Whiskey Commission. He had this idea, and his idea was make a 100% barley whiskey, but besides that, make it as much like a bourbon as possible. Except he also used a pot still, so he didn't go full column still, whatever. He wanted to make something that felt authentically single malt Scotch, just made in America. And so his choice there was age it in the new charred oak barrels. But importantly, he's bringing over all of his barley from Scotland, from the UK. Not necessarily Scotland, but from the UK.
Yeah, and I'm happy that they didn't put that stipulation in there where you could source the barley from anywhere.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I think one of the sort of founding principles of this definition is that it wanted to define the edges of the category well enough that people agree this is a category that has protections for what it is and what it isn't. But they wanted to do it in a way that didn't prevent the creativity that American single malt whiskey is American craft whiskey. There's very little non-craft American single malt whiskey. Now we have people who are owned by Remy. Westland is owned by Remy. Malconis is owned by Diageo. Westward is probably going to be bought out at some point, probably because they're that big. They do a lot of business internationally. There's certainly...
They're already Diageo, I think.
Officially, I don't know that. Unofficially, I have heard they're 49% owned by Diageo.
Okay, because I do remember them at some point in time when they started close to 2015 or shortly after they started close to 2015. They went into a program that was owned by Diageo. The program was owned by Diageo. And it wasn't a buyout per se, but it was an affiliation with. So then I would assume that at some point in time, that affiliation with turned into, part ownership, small majority, something like that.
Bourbon with Friends, welcome in. I don't understand your question.
I think he's asking, Bourbon with Friends, that's going to be Brian. So he works for 10th Mountain Whiskey.
Oh, he said form, but he meant from. How does someone who works from a whiskey company to talk? Do you want to join the call? Is that what you're asking, Brian? Because you're welcome to join the call if you want. Just let me know. I'll send you the link. You can join in. Otherwise, feel free to clarify your question. I'm way behind on the chat now. Tequila finish was wild but good. Yeah. I think in the category of wild but good finishes, you also have like not dessert wine cask, like not like port, sherry, Tokai, Sauterne, not that kind of stuff, but just regular drinking wine, red wine, white wine, like Chardonnay, Pinot Noir. Some of those are just like Pinot Noir just makes sense. Like Pinot Noir from Oregon as a finish on Westward whiskey Just makes sense. Really good stuff. That's my favorite core product from Westward is the Pinot Noir finish. White wine, especially Chardonnay, is wild. Sometimes really good, but unpredictable. You can't go into a store and see a whiskey that's been finished in Chardonnay and know for sure that that's going to be good. There's just something about it that's a little unpredictable. But when they're good, they're good. So aside from sherry, I don't know that we fully answered this question in terms of like what finishes are really good for American single malt whiskey. Port doesn't always work. Sherry for sure works. What's a finish that's uniquely good? It's hard. I mean, there's 200 something Scottish distilleries too, right? Or 100 something Scottish distilleries too. So it's hard to say like with full certainty what finishes don't work in Scotch, but do work in American single malt. But like, what's a finish we're seeing in American single malt that seems to work really well for some reason?
Brandy, apple brandy, pear brandy, those barrels, those tend to work really well. And we have a good amount of that stuff being made here already, so the barrels are available.
Yep. I forgot about that, but that is a really, really good point. Craft brandy in the United States makes available used brandy casks that American single malt whiskeys are using. As a matter of fact, Del Bach does brandy finish especially in their Distiller's Cut series. Cedar Ridge,
that the Normandy.
The Normandy as well, yeah. Calvados, but that's an actual Calvados cask from France.
Okay, all right, but yeah, it's still a brandy-esque.
Yeah, somebody correct me if I'm wrong. I'm 90% sure what I just said is true. That it's an actual Calvados cask. I could go grab the bottle, but it's over there. So maybe when I stand up, I'll go grab it. But not for now. Yeah, Tokai, Hungarian wine. I mean, like Scotch single malts, like world single malts are using Tokai now. Tokai is the new Sauterne. And that's really good too, but it's not uniquely American. It's just that there seems to be more than a handful of them. So
I know I'm not alone in this opinion. I might be in the minority, but I'm not alone. Whatever, try it. You got a cask available? Throw it in there.
Yep.
Try it. See what it's like. Obviously, can you ruin whiskey? Sure, you can. You know, worst case scenario, you redistill it.
One of the best American single malts I've ever had, and this is going to sound really conceited now that I'm saying that I'm in the middle of saying it, but I'm committed. One of the best American single malts that I've ever had was I took okay, I guess technically it's not American single malt whiskey, but I was trialing what if I were to put McCarthy's in a Clear Creek pear brandy cask. We talked about pear brandy a minute ago. So first of all, fuck yeah. What I did though was I took cheap blended Scotch because I needed 2 liters of it and I thought I could potentially ruin it. I put Clear Creek pear brandy in my 2-liter barrel and then I dumped it. It's also really good. I gave that pear brandy a rye finish. Really good stuff. And then I put peated Scotch that was just kind of like generic brand Kalila. I mean, it's like Kalila sourced to somebody who's not labeling it Kalila, right? Unnamed Kalila. I put that in the barrel.
So
heavily peated Scotch with a pear brandy finish. Fucking awesome. I told Caitlin Bartlemay, first of all, try this. I gave her a sample. She's like, that's really good. I said, you should do this. So we'll see. First they have to age the pear brandy in a cask.
I mean, I'll buy it. And what they should do is then sell them together as a pair. Like, here's the pear brandy that went into this cask. Here's the whiskey then that went into the cask afterwards. You have to buy them as a pair.
Yeah.
I mean,
what I will say though,
brandy,
if I
pear,
had,
yeah,
I'm gonna do it again. I'm gonna get more Clear Creek pear brandy, 2 liters of it, the regular stuff, not the 69% still strength stuff, but the regular pear brandy. Put it in the barrel, age it for a while, take it out, and next time I'm putting McCarthy's in. When I finish that experiment, that will be American single malt whiskey, even though I'm not the original distillery. It's finished in the United States. It's all distilled, aged, whatever. Yeah. Looking at this again, it all has to be from one distillery, but it doesn't say anything about aging offsite, which is another important thing. So you can have cask brokers like Single Cask Nation, like Lost Lantern.
I think the rule does say it has to be aged in the United States.
In the United States, yes, but
Yeah.
not in the same distillery
doesn't have to be
warehouse
at
in
the
the same
distillery, correct,
state,
correct.
right? So
Oh, yeah,
can
the joke last night was there's going to be no Jefferson's Ocean single malt.
right.
Yeah.
There's yes, and thank God.
Yes.
Yeah, Sauterne is great. PX is great. Single malt aged in a used rye cask.
Okay, Marshall, I'm actively, strongly trying to talk Great Northern into start making single malt. That is where the good cob, bad cob came from. Obviously, they make rye whiskey. That's what they make. And so, in that instance, my input would be make this malted barley whiskey, throw it in your used rye barrels.
Yep.
And that is going to be my input to them. Hopefully we can kind of work together on that and do that. And I would love to see that. But yes, that is something that I would love to see as a single malt in a used rye cask. Especially a rye cask that held rye for a good portion of time. So, like the 6-year, 7-year mark would be great.
Yeah.
Driftless Glen could do it really easily too.
This is the cool kind of thing we're going to see coming out of the United States, I imagine, because right now the used cask market is entirely foreign, essentially, aside from the handful of single malts that are using used casks. Most American single malts following single malt Scotch tradition and single malt in the rest of the world are using ex-bourbon casks. Why? Because bourbon is the most plentiful kind of new oak cask and everybody can buy them. I mean, there's plenty of rye too, right? But you start seeing distilleries that have a full portfolio of bourbon, rye, and American single malt. And of course, they're going to use their American single malt casks for... Do you remember what Sentinel was? I'm thinking about the Sentinel from Del Bach. Not Del Bach, but like the same distillery. The Sentinel of the Desert. What is the distillery actually called?
Why does that sound familiar?
It was when I did the interview with Mark Viertaler, it was one of the set of products. And I saw it earlier there it is. That one dude Ryan reviewed and really liked this one also.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I know what that is. Yeah.
Hide that comment. Right. Sentinel of the Desert Rye. This comes from Del Bach. It's finished in Del Bach mesquite casks. So this is rye finished in American single malt mesquite malt casks. You could easily imagine that flipping around where Del Bach ages their mesquite single malt in a rye cask. And this works extremely well. This is MGP rye though. This works extremely well, and I could imagine the opposite also working well, where the single malt is finished in a rye cask. I look forward to it. Mark, I'm sure you already had this idea, but you're welcome. Yeah, I think probably we can move on from like what makes a good finish because we're coming up on 2 hours already.
I mean, yeah, finishing is one of those things where just explore it. I mean,
yeah, just explore it. If it sounds good to you, there's a good chance somebody has done it.
Yeah.
And you can probably find it. Or do it at home in your own barrel because I've learned so much from doing my own barrel aging experiments. My advice for that is start your barrel with a bourbon that you want to make double oaked and let it go for longer than you think, being prepared for that to not taste very good, and let it take all of that new charred oak out of the barrel first. Then you really get into the interesting stuff. So like season it, like I seasoned mine with port, and then I did rye with a port finish, and then I seasoned it with sherry, and I did port, then bourbon with a port finish, then I seasoned it with sherry, and I did rye with a sherry finish.
Wow.
Or something like yeah. And then I put the pear brandy in, and the cask has been used like 4 times now. At the moment, it has the sludge of rum that I aged for 1.5 years and left too long. But last time I tested it, it was 83% alcohol.
Wow.
And I went to a distillery and asked a distiller, can you please test how high the proof is on this? And so that was a professional testing.
Wow.
And they were like, what the hell? Did you put like grain neutral spirits in this? I'm like, no, I just let it age over my space heater for 6 months or a year or whatever it was at the time. I cooked it.
Making false heat.
Yeah, it was an accident. I didn't mean to do that, but that's what happened. Because I was aging it on this shelf over here, and just off camera is my space heater. You can't see it. Or was. I rearranged the room, but like the barrel used to be up there and the space heater was right next to it, so it was just cooking it.
Cursor.
I didn't realize that.
We had just actually talked about that. No, there's no actual category for that, but I mean, I think they're going to be able to skirt around that because there's already the options for blending straight whiskeys. So I think they're going to just be able to skirt around that with the rules that are in place now. So like if all the stuff in the blend is a straight American single malt, they'll be able to put on the label a blend of straight American single malts. I feel like that's going to be a thing that they're going to be allowed to do.
I think here's this should work letter of the law. I'm not a lawyer, but this should work letter of the law to blend American single malts. So the problem now is that Lost Lantern vatted malt whiskey could call themselves a blend of American single malt whiskey, but in fact they just said vatted malt whiskey because there were no legal terms anyway.
Right.
There could hypothetically be a product that is today listed as a blend of American single malt and then whiskey on another line or something like that. What they could now do, or they may have already done this and they could keep on doing this. What they could now do is blended whiskey, a blend of American single malts. Because the type would be blended whiskey. It's the catch-all type whiskey with the blended part. Catch-all blended whiskey type. And then everything else they could just say it's a blend of American single malts. And that doesn't carry any legal meaning, and therefore it's okay, and it's not misleading, and it tells you what's in the bottle, and the TTB is going to approve that, almost certainly. The thing that they're going to have to watch out for is they can't put the phrase American single malt whiskey, quote unquote, on a product that is not legally exactly American single malt whiskey. So a blend of American single malt whiskeys, that phrase likely will not fly, but it might. That's a somewhat subjective decision on the TTBs about whether they think it's misleading or not, because their main thing is these laws exist. And at the end of the day, the job of the TTB is to make sure there's no consumer confusion.
The biggest takeaway here is the protected term is actually American single malt whiskey is the protected term. So, if you don't put the American on there, it's not the full protected term. So if you just put a blend of single malt whiskeys from America, that would be outside of that protected term, probably fly. If you put blend of American single malt whiskey, it probably won't.
Brian, where should I send the link? Should I send it to your Instagram DMs? Yeah, he DM'd me. Yeah, cool. There you go. Yes, please join. Okay, cool. Brian from Bourbon with Friends and 10th Mountain Whiskey.
Yes.
Somehow I just triggered my Google Assistant. Yeah, Brian's going to join us. The addition, yeah, okay. So to answer the question about the 83% rum, I unfortunately let it evaporate because I was rearranging my office, which took not a weekend, but apparently 3 months. And then it had evaporated. So that rum, unfortunately, basically doesn't exist. There's a little sludge in the bottom of the barrel. I'm gonna put single malt in the barrel. That's what I'm gonna do with it. It's gonna be rum concentrate going into single malt, and I have no idea how that's gonna turn out. It might be great. It might be absolutely horrible. We'll see.
So you have you got like dehydrated rum in this barrel, and you're gonna rehydrate the dehydrated rum with single malt whiskey.
That's essentially the idea. Yeah. Hey, Brian, welcome.
I like this idea.
Hey, thanks for joining. You use StreamYard on Bourbon with Friends, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Cool. So you're well established.
Yes.
Only thing is you're just a little bit quiet if you want to turn your mic up.
Okay.
All right. Hey, cool. It's good to have you on the podcast. I was going to reach out for like a collab between Bourbon with Friends and my podcast at some point.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
this is close. Or also just interview you for 10th Mountain.
Fun.
If we keep on talking like whiskey enthusiasts, is that going to bother you at all from a perspective of an industry person having an opinion?
Oh no, that would be awful. Yeah. So based off of everything that you guys are saying, it's great. But working in the industry and seeing all these context and information that's coming out, I believe it's going to add a little bit of a complication to people, like you said, that are doing these blends, and may have some issues in the future with it. But in all, I think it's going to be over. It's going to be a game changer throughout the series and what's going on with American Single Malts as a whole. The finishes and everything like that, I'm not sure I totally agree with, to be honest, because an American Single Malt should be an American Single Malt. A finish is a finish afterwards, not
Yeah.
a fully matured malt that goes into one continuous barrel and stays in that.
Okay.
But that's
So
neither-
as like a dissenting point, you're sort of saying like, hey, bourbon has to declare it differently if they put it in a finishing cask. So why shouldn't American Single Malt have the same thing? Yeah,
Yes.
that's a valid argument. As it stands, that's not what they legislated. Basically, any cask, any series of casks works. That's in alignment with what everybody's been doing. I'm okay with it. Personally, I like that. But I do see where you're coming from. Yeah. Just to be in alignment with the rest of American whiskey, it'd be nice if it wasn't a special snowflake.
Yeah, I mean, everybody needs a special snowflake in their life, but does it have to be American Single Malt?
Yeah. And all the ways in which, so we were talking about this a bit last night. So I sort of started this conversation by saying, let's talk about what whiskey is in the world and then just talk about what American Single Malt whiskey is. And don't worry about bourbon. Don't worry about scotch, because it gets really confusing when you start rationalizing American Single Malt whiskey in the context of these other categories, even as it's taken inspiration. But when we look at like, why did they write all of this technical goop? We know the 700 liters is a nod to scotch. Okay. But like this stuff,
and that keeps it in line with everything else already established.
yeah. I don't think anyone's going to debate this point, but it's important for me, I think, to call out this is the same for every other whiskey in the world.
Pretty much, yep. Except
pretty much. There's probably
well,
some countries where they don't have a minimum proof, but like
yeah, I mean
spirits
Scotland
proof,
doesn't have that.
Yeah,
They can distill higher than 160.
they can.
yeah, but the 40% alcohol.
It's still that's the floor. 40% of
Yeah.
the floor. For
So
bottling.
so
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
pretty much everyone's going to agree that's the bar for being spirits proof. That's what makes it whiskey. So like that's written here because it's a technical detail. It's an encouragement to the TTB to write that, to make that in alignment with the rest of other types of whiskey, but that's not meant to be a distinction of this category, right? Distinctions of the category are 100% malted barley. That's a distinction of the category. Distilled entirely at one distillery. That's a distinction of the category. This mash distilled and matured in the United States of America. Well, that's pretty much true for every, I think
most.
it's all the other types of whiskey are also that. That's not distinctive of the category.
Bourbon for sure.
Bourbon.
But rye whiskey can come from other places.
Correct. Yep.
Okay. So bourbon and American Single Malt agree on this point that it has to come from entirely within you, except for the grain. The grain can come from somewhere else.
Yes.
And that's true for bourbon too, I believe. You can get corn from, say, Canada, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't think they put a specification on source of grain.
No.
Yeah.
I would go back through my notes from the last class I took, but I thought it said continental United States.
Okay.
I believe
so you can't make bourbon in Alaska?
It's part of the continent technically, since it's still attached.
Oh, it's not. Okay. Contiguous, but not continent. So Hawaii can't make bourbon? Okay. Never mind. We're off topic.
No, that's
They do specify that Puerto Rico can actually make bourbon. So
okay.
well,
What
we're
about
not
Guam?
legals and the ramifications of the legal term of what Puerto Rico is.
But it is technically part of the United States.
It's
and it does qualify as a place that you could make bourbon.
American Samoa is part of the United States as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not a bourbon expert. We probably should
and
steer this ship back a little bit towards
ASM.
Yeah. Yeah, ASM. Okay, so oak casks, this isn't special, but what it doesn't say is the distinction. It's
Correct.
not new charred oak casks. It's any type of oak casks. It could be new toasted oak. It could be used oak of any kind. It just has to be oak. So this matured in oak casks, this is distinctive of the category.
Right. And
that doesn't say anything about the finishing question. We're leaving
exactly.
that aside.
Yeah, no, and I'm great with that. It doesn't matter to me anyway. It's like Scotch. Scotch is primarily in used casks. So having this distinction does not bother me. It's the ability to finish without defining that finish and then continuing forwards with that, I don't agree with.
Yeah. I hadn't really thought at length about that, but that is a really good point. As a matter of consumer transparency,
Yes,
saying what casks you used feels like an important piece of information. Craft distilleries want to tell you. So that's kind of why I never thought this was a problem, right? Virginia Distilling Company and their VDC line, it's ex-bourbon, and they tell you exactly what casks they put in it. The Courage and Conviction line, same deal. They tell you what casks they're using. They don't have to.
But they want
so there's no requirement for transparency here, but at least if we had to say, hey, finishing casks still need to be declared as a difference in the category.
Yeah,
then
that would be what's more adamant about it, is just defining or stating what you're doing with it.
So that does go back to our point about, if you guys are interested in quality American single malt and you don't know which distilleries to look at, check this list out. Transparency is gigantic for the American Single Malt Whiskey Commission. I mean, that is like up front and top of the list of their vision statement.
Yeah. So let's talk about, I don't know if we ever really explained why are we looking at this list. So these members of the American Single Malt Whiskey Commission that are on this page have publicly pledged, before the ratification of the legal definition, publicly pledged to go along with the ASMWC's proposed definition for American Single Malt Whiskey that you see here.
Plus more. Hit back to the homepage of this.
This is just proposed, was the initial, and then it continues on to a lot more information. So
I think it's under your logo for me. Okay, so there's a tab that'll say transparency on it.
Oh, yeah.
There we go, transparency. So this is, I mean, so if you are going to pledge to do what the American Single Malt Whiskey Commission wants in making American Single Malt Whiskey, this is part of what you have to follow along. So being transparent about what you do with your practice label and marketing is important to the commission. And if you're going to be that, you have to follow along with that. So you are getting transparent companies when you look at this list and you buy from that list, and you know, whereas, you know, and I hate to bring these guys up again, but Pfluger, you know, little less transparent than what they should be.
They are,
you know,
yeah, you know, I have hedged calling them out loudly on air. And I try to do, I try, especially when I have a producer interview, if I reference other brands, I want it to be in a positive light. But here, even though Brian works for a distillery, this is not a producer interview. And so I think we should draw attention to the elephant in the room that is Pfluger single malt whiskey. So we have defined the term American single malt whiskey, quote unquote. Right, there it is again. Or actually rather this, right? They have defined the term American single malt whiskey, but they didn't define the term single malt. So hopefully TTB doesn't let this happen, but it is plausible that Pfluger's product, which is 80% malt, 20% rye, and they're labeling a single malt whiskey, they could continue to label their product Pfluger single malt whiskey, even under the American single malt whiskey definition existing, because technically their label is not affected by this definition. That is a problem that I have with the lack of a definition in TTB's decision for the term single malt. which I would have liked to see protected and reserved. Yes, we're defining the phrase American single malt whiskey as a type, but to make that definition complete, we need to protect the use of the term single malt on American-made products.
Yes.
And we didn't. So that's a loophole that the commission is going to look to close. As I understand,
Yes.
Steve hasn't told me that directly, but I've heard that from several producers, and Brian is confirming.
Here's the thing about what they're doing. They purposefully chose the word single, right? I don't care about the word malt. They purposefully chose the word single. Now, are there other companies out there putting out what could be possibly somehow, some way in the slightest bit called single malt? Yeah, probably. Here's my one good example is the Rare Character Exceptional series. Now, this is a nice bottle of whiskey, and I'm not going to take anything away from it. However, they do not say anything about single malt on it. It is a Kentucky straight malt whiskey. That's it. That's what they say it is.
Yep.
So it meets the requirements of 51% or more malt whiskey. That's it. And it's made in Kentucky.
Yep. Woodford Reserve straight malt whiskey is really good.
Same
whiskey.
deal. Yep.
Yeah.
Same deal. These guys are not
malt.
trying to jump on a train. They're not trying to, kind of weasel their way into something that's gaining in popularity at the moment. Obviously, they're bigger brands. Rare Character is a fairly large brand. Woodford, fairly large brand, or very large brand, realistically. But they're not trying to do anything funny there. Fluger is trying to do something funny, and it's very apparent. And maybe we're wrong. Maybe they're mistaken. Who knows? I don't know what. Yeah, I know you had brought up another scenario yesterday where it's possible that they named it that or decided to call it that for another reason. That was
I know that there's a tendency for people to be like, ooh, I don't like that. Fluger called their product a single malt whiskey. It's clearly not a single malt whiskey, except that is a consumer sentiment based on legal definitions that don't exist. Right? So I agree. My gut is I agree with that sentiment. Fluger is doing something nasty as far as I'm concerned. They're trading on the popularity of American single malt whiskey by labeling their product as single malt. That's my personal take. But I just say, let's take a step back. TTB can't make that call because that would be a non-objective, not based in legal reality decision about a product being worthy of being labeled one way or another when there's no legal definition of the term, right? So there's a few overlapping concerns there that I kind of addressed yesterday. I think I did a really good job, and I'm not going to do nearly as good a job today. But first of all, devil's advocate. It's possible that Fluger was totally ignorant of the existence of American single malt whiskey as a category. Now, we know that's not true, but we are 99% sure that's not true.
Right.
And then they said, hey, the word single in Scotch means it came from a single distillery. We're a single distillery. We make a malt whiskey as defined by the standards of identity, 51% malted barley aged in new oak. We're a single distillery. That's a single malt. Great. We have a single malt product. Print it, right? Plausibly, devil's advocate, plausible deniability, that could be true. And the result of that product existing could be that, and we don't have full transparency to what TTB was thinking, right? But TTB seems almost too concerned with protecting the businesses, whether consumers would consider that, something like that, legitimate or not. They don't want to harm the business, a label that already exists. So maybe one of the reasons that they didn't want to define single malt in this ruling is because there are products labeled single malt that don't qualify as American single malt whiskey, and they don't want to hurt those products.
No.
Possibly.
No.
Possibly.
No. I'm just going to go with no at that point because the basis of that is false. I'm not saying you're false about what you're stating in any means or any facts in any way, right? I agree with you. 99% sure.
The false premise is that Fluger does know what they're doing.
Oh,
and it
they
is
absolutely
shady.
Fucking know what they're doing, and it is shady. Call out a company that is doing something wrong and agree with it.
Kings County, excellent.
Yeah. Oh,
Sorry,
look at
no,
that.
I'm not. Sorry, for people who are
Look at
just
that.
listening, I'm not calling out Kings County as doing something shady.
Not Kings
No,
Herm
County.
held up a
I'm
bottle of Kings
drinking
County,
Kings
and he's
County
moving on to drinking.
ASM, and
Yeah.
in a whiskey punkard glass. Look at that.
Sweet.
Look, he's punked.
Yeah. Speaking of, hey, I haven't, this is my own stream and I haven't done any self-promotion yet today. Hey, we printed Glencairns with our Single Malt Frontier barrel pick sticker on them, and there's an order form in the description of this video. Go get them.
There we go. I don't think you can get this glass.
That's a really nice looking glass, though. That cut crystal, good stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, so okay, so let's rapid fire through some comments that I've missed in the last 20 minutes because I wasn't reading. Cursor in Seattle says the addition of straight to ASM is really interesting. Yeah, the members of the commission that I've talked to, nobody that I've heard from yet knew that that was going to be coming. They thought that they were only defining regular American single malt whiskey, that they weren't defining straight. For me, I love that we have a straight definition, the 2-year minimum age statement, right? It puts it in line with bourbon can have straight bourbon, rye can have straight rye. Malt whiskey can have straight malt whiskey. American single malt whiskey can have straight American single malt whiskey. And now we have this acronym, Ryan Legend, SASMW. Yeah,
SASMU.
we're getting really close to alphabet soup if we weren't there already. ASMWC. Yeah, anyway.
At least it's not SMWS.
Right. That's so many syllables. Although anything with W in it is just, W is an unfortunate letter that is 3 syllables long. Anyway, so it's cool that exists. My problem with it is, so American single malt whiskey can allow E150A. Technically, they didn't say E150A. They said caramel coloring. Europe defines 2 types of caramel coloring, E150A, E150B. Both are allowed in American whiskey. So it's not necessarily E150A. On the other hand, they have to disclose it. E150 is allowed, but must be disclosed. That's good news. What I don't like.
No, that was a question.
And I answered that question in my public comments.
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
It does have to be disclosed on the label if they use it. Yes.
Yes.
Oh, by the way, I don't know. I haven't tooted my own horn about this on this, but the coolest thing for me when I saw this press release was they referenced the public comments, the decision from TTB referenced the public comments that I penned. So there's the Whiskey Lodge and the Our American SMW communities. I'm a mod of the Whiskey Lodge. I created that subreddit. I wrote that public comment and got 40 signatures on it. And I submitted that to the TTB. They called it out in the decision. I've never been closer to the democratic process. I'm immortalized in the Federal Register now, and that's super cool for me.
I can only imagine that it was like, somewhere around 2,000 word essay of
he's fucking looking right now.
Yeah, looking it up. Look right there. 2 associated online whiskey enthusiast communities that submitted a joint comment, the Whiskey Lodge and Reddit community, Our American SMW. This is a typo because Our American SMW is not associated with the Whiskey Lodge directly. Stated that the requirement to distill at a single distillery was great and the bare minimum for single malt. I can't be the only person who wrote that, though. I like that they called out my comment, though.
No, I don't.
Oh, sorry. I should have been showing this on screen. There we are.
There we go.
That's me. I wrote that. I mean, I wrote the comment that they're referencing.
Nice.
So that's cool.
Thanks, Tigger. So it's great.
I mean, really, so realistically, Doug, it sounds like you're saying we should be thanking you for this.
Totally. I mean, I say facetiously, totally, you should be thanking me. But actually, what I mean to say genuinely is everybody who wrote a public comment to the TTB had an influence on what they ultimately decided. Yes, they spent all of their time deliberating on all of these comments. Everybody who wrote and said, we agree with the ASMWC, you made it easy for them. I did the opposite, and I almost felt like a jerk because I wrote like a 8-page document or something.
I was going to say, you had to have a serious,
that was your thesis paper.
It was. You can still read some version of it on my blog. It is, if I'm not mistaken, 50,000 words. No, 5,000 words, like 50,000 characters. It is
like 50,000 words. Jesus, fuck.
Yeah. But let me go see. It's long. If I just like Control A, I'm not going to show this on screen, but if I just like Control A, paste it in a text editor, it is 37,000 characters.
37,000.
It bears mentioning some of what I wrote there is going to be introductory material in the book on American Single Malt Whiskey, which is the reason this podcast exists, right? I'm working on a book on American Single Malt Whiskey, and whenever I write, it's usually with the intention it's something that could go into the book in some format.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I'm dying over here at Ryan's comment. I love Dougie's sidetrack rants. Devil's advocate, at least another 15 minutes to stream. Dying. There's nothing more accurate I have ever read in my life.
Okay, so anyway, Ryan Legend, go check him out on Instagram. He does great whiskey photography, and he's also one of the reviewers on maltrunners.com, along with me and a bunch of other people who used to write for our Scotch on Reddit before Reddit got weird and they killed all the mobile apps. We made our own website called maltrunners.com. Ryan does good reviews over there, so check him out. And yeah, I love when you guys rib me.
It's not a rip. It's just it's facts. That's all.
it's ribbing. It's good natured ribbing, and I take it that way. And the fact that you're all still here, there's 10 people still watching, and I'm not even boosting my own viewership numbers today because I didn't log into Twitch. So thanks for joining. Thanks for watching. Thanks for sticking with us for 2 hours and 15 minutes now. As long as there's questions, I'll keep trying to answer them until I'm falling asleep. And Brian is bringing new energy. So what else did I miss in the comments up here?
My energy out of here pretty soon because
that's totally understandable.
It's getting late for me.
Yeah.
No way. It is.
It's after midnight. One thing I promised is I wasn't going to keep German until after midnight. So
if you want to sign off, it's only 11:17. So I mean,
right, your central time.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. All right. Well, we'll still try to speed this along a little bit. Yeah. Jason, one of the absolute best decisions they made with this rule is not restricting distillers to new charred oak. In my personal opinion, I agree with that. I think there are certainly people who disagree with that point. There's a certain angle from which you can say that's a valid objection. But on the other hand, what are we going to do with all of these used barrels that we keep selling to other countries? It's nice that we now have, besides light whiskey, can light whiskey be aged in any type of cask? Besides corn whiskey and maybe light whiskey.
Light whiskey can go in anything too.
It's nice that we finally have, and also those are tiny categories, corn whiskey and light whiskey, right?
Extremely.
Now that we have a whole category with 250 plus producers, American Single Malt Whiskey, who can at their option choose to age in used cooperage, there is a domestic market, a real bona fide, like useful quantity domestic market for used whiskey casks. That's huge.
Here's the thing about that. People that object to this saying that it can be in any kind of oak cask, used, new, uncharred, blah, blah, blah. If they're objecting to this and saying that it should be new charred oak only, then use new charred oak only. I don't care what you use, but let somebody that doesn't want to use it use something different. Don't gripe about it. Let the creativity go.
So no, I agree with you, and it's like a cost saving benefit to certain distilleries, right? So coming at it from a distillery's perspective, think about the cost benefit. Yeah, we can sell that to a distillery in Scotland or a third party that then will sell that at a higher cost to Scotland or other countries around the world that'll use it. But we're able to reuse that same oak, continue on with the same process that we have, and then possibly gain back some of that flavor profile that we used from those different barrels and casks that we already did to gain more of a higher profile or a higher taste than we would have previously. So
yeah, I think I think the used oak is great for distilleries that have, I mean, you said it earlier, that have a large portfolio. So if they're making bourbon, if they're making rye, and then they're making American Single Malt, they can use their bourbon and rye barrels to do their single malt with. It's awesome. It's a win-win for them, especially a small distillery. Absolutely.
Yeah, but if we're going to be saving $690 per barrel, because that's on average, any cooperage out there is going to sell it to you at that price. Does not matter where you're coming from. That's new charred American oak. On average, you're talking about I'm going to say 850 all the way down to 650. It's
Okay.
dependent on the cooperage you're going with and who's it's coming from.
And you're talking 53s, right? I mean,
That's 53s.
yeah.
So that's the average range cost that you're going to be looking at from different cooperages around the U.S. Not around the world. That's just U.S.-based cooperages that I've looked at and I've used in the past. From there, we're able to save that and reuse those and continue on with that process and save a lot more money. 100%. I know so many different companies that are going to be doing this and moving forwards with it.
Absolutely.
Us as a
Why would you
company,
not?
I'm not sure that we're going to be jumping straight into it because reselling our barrels right now, we're able to get it up for a little bit higher cost because I was able to negotiate a deal with another company and I was able to get half of that back from selling it. So if I can get half back from a used barrel, 100% of the time we're going to do that.
Because that's better than using it for your own product, you're saying, is selling it on for half of what you paid.
To an extent, correct. Because we're not able to produce the amount we want to because our distillery is not large enough to produce all that barrel waste at the same time as reproduce a new product and then put it into those barrels. So if there's a cost benefit analysis for it, yeah. If we're able to save 25% and do it and then sell the rest at that 50% decrease in markdown, yeah, we're going to do that.
Yep, makes sense.
Cursor,
I don't believe we welcomed
good
Whiskey
question.
Addict to the stream. If you're still hanging out, hello.
What's up, Mike?
Mike.
Marshall has decided to choose violence.
He has always chose violence.
That's not abnormal. That's not abnormal.
However, I think we can all pretty much universally agree with that sentiment.
Yeah.
Cursor has a great question.
Dicks
do
are
you
not for chicks.
see
Wait,
this
no,
as likely to further escalate barrel prices? Yeah.
Do you
Barrel
see
prices.
this as- yeah.
Barrel prices are never going to stop increasing. It's just kind of how it is. You pay the price goes up. You continue to pay the price is going to continue to go up. It's the same deal with just about everything else.
I'm actually going to change that sentiment because I do see barrel prices decreasing in the next 2 years.
Okay.
Not to an extreme amount, but I can see new cooperages or cooperages coming and using that, what their cost is comparative to get the steel and everything, because now it's going to be primarily produced in the United States and we're getting away from the third party or getting away from those tariffs. And it's going to be cheaper for them to get the steel in the US as well as produce that wood or get the wood if it's here in the US, if it's new charred American oak barrels, and use it that way. I think that it's not going to reduce by a ton, but I can see it reducing by, I don't know, 5 to 7% in the next 2 years.
I would be incredibly impressed if any company took their cost, like, okay, so this is our cost, so this is what we have to sell for, right? If their cost goes down over the course of the next year, but people are already buying at this price, but their cost goes down, I would be incredibly impressed if I saw a company come out and say, you know what, our cost went down, your price is going to go down.
It's happening across the board, and I can say that with whiskey as well. So some whiskey companies are actually, their costs are going down, so they're reducing those costs of their bourbons, rye, and American single malts. So it's the same avenue of approach. So if we're able to reduce the cost of the cooperage, the cost of the whiskey is going to go down, which makes the American consumer buy more of it, and which produces a higher quality of whiskey because we're able to buy more of it. So
yeah,
it's a full plain game for everybody. If you look at anything that's a cost wise or a benefit analysis wise, if you're able to reduce the cost in some areas, which reduces the cost of the whiskey in general, but keeps the quality the same, then why wouldn't you want to buy more of it? And then more is produced, then you get more cooperage, and then it's a revolving door because then you're buying more barrels, not less barrels at that point.
Yeah, supply and demand is complicated, but yes, you make some very good points.
Yeah.
I want us to maybe discuss that the latter point of volume of ASM will continue to be relatively low. It depends. I think that's on its surface that's a good declaration, but what we're seeing right now is a rapid increase in number of American single malt, a number of distilleries that are producing American single malt of some description, and the ones that are successful with it will probably ramp up production. For example, we saw Balcones always wanted to make single malt. They made a bunch of other stuff for a while, and Jared confirmed on the One Nation Under Whiskey conference call that they released earlier today that they are now intentionally exclusively making single malt whiskey, and they have a huge capacity on their stills. Their entire facility is being used to make single malt now. That's
Correct.
already a huge change from 2 years ago where they were making bourbon and rum and corn whiskey and all this other stuff.
And rye and
rye and every
DSSs
style of
and,
whiskey you can imagine, but now they're making exclusively single malt whiskey. So just
they
just
have
them alone.
You're talking Balcones. They have 7, and this was 2 years ago now, so it may have changed, but I think they have 7,000 gallons of ferment available and 4,000 gallons of stills available.
A little bit more than that now. So I think they're at 9,500 gallons for ferment.
Okay, so they added one or two more.
Yeah, I think they added one more. I think it was 1,500.
Okay.
So,
but their stills are very, very unique. And
yes,
huge capacity there. Obviously, I mean, I think just it depends on what you mean by relatively low. Like compared to bourbon, yeah, sure, for a long time, right? There's 3,000 distilleries in the United States, and 250 of them are making some amount of single malt whiskey.
Yeah.
So, I suspect that now that we see a regulation, that number of distilleries is going to grow a lot, and so the volume of single malt will grow a lot.
I think that number of distilleries initially is actually going to drop.
Because that's an unfortunate and fair point. We're already seeing distillery closures, or at least brand closures, right? Especially large profile. Recently, we saw. I mean, Waterford's not an American whiskey, but Waterford was a big craft darling of whiskey enthusiasts for a long time. When I interviewed Daniel Whittington, he poured me a Waterford. That's part of my whiskey story now. That brand closed. Kentucky Owl closed. Another big high profile American sourcing, but still craft distillery ish.
Yeah. Copper Sky in Colorado, they just closed.
Ooh.
Yep.
Hate to see it.
Yep. Same here.
Yeah. Distilleries closed.
I want to buy all their stuff though.
Yep. Thankfully, Bull Run in Portland has not closed yet, but when I was doing my first American single malt whiskey advent in 2021, I learned that there was another Portland maker of American single malt whiskey that had already closed, and moreover, Sealbox had already sold out of whatever stock of their whiskey they already had, so I could never try it. And I mean, I feel personally disappointed in that because I really wanted to try yet another American single malt from my region, but alas.
I may have something here, so we can. I don't know. I have to dig through my basement.
Fair enough.
Whiskey.
Yeah, right. I'm always up to swap for cool things. Yeah, Germ, you want to hop off?
Doug, yes, I'm going to hop off. Everybody in the comments, thank you, and great comments, great questions, great insights. Marshall, using a barrel 2 to 4 times. I absolutely see it happening 2 times per distillery. 4 times maybe getting a little far out there, but I mean, for me personally, if I was running a distillery, I would do it. I would.
Yeah, I don't think so necessarily.
There's times.
Just it depends
where it went.
It depends on where your barrel's from.
Yeah,
barrels that are made in the traditional bourbon way, where it's intended to be used for bourbon once and sold to Scotch and used once, maybe twice. Those barrels are not made to stand up the test of time for hundreds of years, but sherry casks in sherry Solera systems literally keep working for hundreds of years. They're totally inert, but they keep holding liquid.
Yeah.
So depends on what you want from your barrels. And then you have like Cascnolia, Kelvin Cooperage, Oregon Barrel Works are making barrels to a standard that they're meant to be used over and over and over again. So
Yes.
so you have like McCarthy's. It's not on my desk anymore, but the one I was drinking yesterday, Single Barrel 70. I got all kinds of details about that one. It's been McCarthy's all the way down, and it was at least its fourth fill.
Okay.
So
the
McCarthy's
next year is a third fill, Gary. So
Yeah.
I mean, it's absolutely viable to use it more than twice.
Yeah. Now the question, will it amplify the distillery profile? Maybe, but the barrel is going to become increasingly inert. So if the distillery profile is light on the barrel influence, then yes.
I would say it's dependent on, again, well, I'm going to go with the char, or is it toasted? So it depends on how it was actually created in the first place. So if it was,
and there's always the option of
Yep.
dechar, rechar, or just rechar.
Yep.
There's always options. There's playing around available. So the beauty of it is the rule states it has to be an oak container. That's it.
Yeah.
And less than 700 liters. So
there's 4 distilleries closing in Texas. That is sad. But I thought that was funny that he wished because Garrison was one of them.
Too bad it wasn't 5, right?
Stop it.
All right. Everybody,
Yeah.
thank you. And Doug, thank you. Brian.
Yeah, Germ, thanks for joining. Brian, I think I'm going to hang out for a little bit longer if you want to stay on.
Yeah, I can stay for a little bit longer. I have a little bit left in my
All right,
glass.
Germ,
and
cheers.
I'm off.
Thanks for joining me. Until next time.
Cheers, sir.
Cheers to this American spirit.
You got it. Cheers to this American spirit. Later, guys.
See you, buddy.
Why did I suddenly lose audio?
I don't know. I can hear you.
I think my headphones died. Hang on. I'll just switch to... Wait, try again?
What am I trying?
Just talking. Yeah, okay, cool. We're back. I don't know
cool.
what happened, but I can hear you again, so cool.
That was strange.
Yeah. Germ leaving
yeah.
disrupted my Bluetooth.
You were being hacked the entire time. You just didn't know it.
That's right. He was hacking me. That must have been what was going on.
Yeah.
Okay. At this point, I'm going to say if there's any questions that you wrote in the chat that I didn't get to, say them again, because at this point I'm just reading chat. I would love to keep talking about the actual regulation.
No, let's get back into the regulation and try to see how we can define it as consumers, and then I will try to paralegal it as someone who works for a distillery.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah.
So I gave my perspective on how I think consumers should look at this. But Brian, you have the floor. How do you think consumers should look at this?
Well, consumers should look at it as the same thing as a category for bourbon or rye. It's defined pretty straightforward. It's made with 100% American, not American, made from 100% malted barley, distilled entirely at one distillery. Those are 2 defined definitions that you said are excellent choices. And we need to push those and continue to establish and make sure they're done with. Then this is something a little bit different. Mashed, distilled, and matured in the United States. So as the United States of America, is it defining the United States of America as its territories or as its states? So territories are completely separate. And then the states are separate from the territories. So Puerto Rico could not be actually involved if it's just considering the states. If it's considering the territories as well, then you have 7 territories that can be considered and established under this regulation. So it could be American Samoa. It could be Guam. Puerto Rico. And several others. I'm not going to get into it. I was a federal officer. I was a federal officer for too long, and I just don't want to get back into that legal jargon.
Yeah.
So, matured in oak casks of a capacity not exceeding 700 liters. That's absolutely fine. That's average. That's what everybody expected, and I'm great with that.
Oh, I did want to
Again,
add something on this point.
yeah.
I talked about this yesterday on when we were doing the stream with Germ, but my audience who maybe didn't hear that. My first interview was with Jared Himstedt, and one of the questions I wanted to ask was, you have the most aggressive aging climate of any American single malt whiskey that I know.
Yes.
How do you at Balcones feel about the 700 liter cask limit? What he told me was, and this is going to vary distillery to distillery, there's a lot of factors, right? But for Balcones, he said, we found 53-gallon barrels were too active, but they didn't go to 70-gallon barrels. They went to like 59-gallon barrels.
Right.
It's like just a little bit bigger. And then, and that they don't want to release anything under 2 years old. And as far as their aging goals are concerned, that is sufficient. The 59-gallon barrels gets them to at least 2 years old, on maybe even 3 years old. He said, I'd have to check my notes. But like gets them to the age they want to have for all of their single malt whiskey. 700 liters isn't even close to the realm of possibility that they need in order to let their whiskey age long enough. So Jared thinks this is fine. And so my extrapolation from there is, well, if Balcones in Central Texas is fine with this, 700 liters is a huge cask. 53-gallon American oak cask is, if I'm not mistaken, basically 300 liters. Or am I too high?
No, you're about right. It's about 300 liters.
Right. So 700 liters is more than twice as large. There's only one standard type of cask that is larger than 700 liters, and that is a ton. And tons are typically used for blending and marrying.
Correct.
So in practice, 700 liters maximum oak cask size is not really a restriction, but what it does let us do is sell American single malt whiskey in markets that have that same restriction as Scotland has, the 700 liters, without a question about, was this aged appropriately?
Correct.
And that's a really good thing for the category's global viability.
Well, I'm not going to even try to pronounce
Cursor in Seattle, I believe.
Thank you. I was going to try, but it's not going to fucking happen. How do you think ASM regs will impact other definitions of whiskeys globally? Scotland, England, Japan. It's not. For this reason.
I want to say, I think that's a really good question. That's a really thoughtful question.
No, it is. And I believe it's not going to define it based off of certain things that have already happened. Scotland, they have the oldest definition, or one of the oldest definitions out there. It is not going to change. England has followed in line, and they are staying with the regulations that they have already set forth. Those regulations were actually set forth back in the 1700s, right around the same time as Scotland set theirs. It's almost like a step-in-step queue with them. Japan set theirs recently. I believe it was 2.5 years ago.
Yep, something like that. Worth mentioning, Scotland rewrote the rule. SWA rewrote the rules to clarify a whole bunch of things relatively recently, like 2003, I think.
That's not fucking recently, but it's recently compared to the 1700s.
Compared to the 1700s, fairly recently. Yeah. And
but,
also worth noting, that also is after Japan started making single malt according to the Scotch rules, and then Japan later, 2.5 years ago, adopted the new SWA rules for Scotch almost wholesale.
Yes,
like almost exactly word for word.
Oh yeah, almost exactly. The only thing that I would say has been different is India. India has not defined a full amount of rules. They can establish that their single malt can come from different countries and then be processed and pushed into their state or country as a single malt.
Oh, earlier in the Instagram chat, you said no do 10th Mountain. I think that was when we were going down the list.
Yeah, that was me. I was
We can
making
get back
fun
to
of
the list.
Boulder. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. I mean, I don't have any 10th Mountain.
Oh, that's racist. No, I think I know a guy. I think I can change that.
Cool. Also,
I'll
you
send
have been on my
you-
list to ask for an interview, but I was like, oh, you're on Bourbon with Friends now. You're talking all the time about your brand. You don't need me to boost you.
Don't
But I
care.
will. I will.
I don't care. No, that's my job is to promote everybody and make everybody happy. So I don't care in any definition or any way. What happens, I'm happy to interview with everybody and talk any type of whiskey at all. I'm educated-ish and I drink whiskey-ish.
You just kind of keep getting Adrian to drink more American Single Malt. That's the mission.
Exactly. That is my job.
Okay,
right,
so let's go. Ryan had some good questions as well.
Yep.
Sorry, do you want to keep going down this the regulation from a consumer perspective? Let's do that. Let's finish that, and then we'll answer the other questions.
Distill to no more than I mean that's absolutely fine. I have no issues with that. No more than 160 US and then proof at 80%.
Right.
Okay.
So let's do justice to the fact that companies like Brother Justice exist.
Yes.
And say not everybody agrees with this. There was a whole lot of people who thought this would not be controversial at all, but then you have Brother Justice is like, hey, I'm making a whiskey that violates that rule, and I think that it is every bit single malt as the rest of you.
Well, I would be
valid perspective for a person who makes something he calls single malt to have.
Yes, it is.
Valid point of view. By the way, I've had like 3 hours of lengthy, spirited, and positive debate with Phil Steger, the founder of Brother Justice.
Yeah.
He's an extremely thoughtful guy. I actually do like his whiskey. Like it would be one thing if I had tried the whiskey and I was like, this doesn't taste like single malt, or this isn't good whiskey or whatever. And I could just be like, well, you're just complaining. But in actual fact, I like his whiskey. It's only distilled to 163 proof. It's not egregiously high. It's not almost vodka.
Only.
Yeah. It's high, but it's not vodka. It's not grain neutral spirit. It's just a little over the line. And I said, hey, that's only 3 proof points. How hard could it really be to bring that down to 160 and just be in alignment? And he said that they actually did a lot of R&D. And take this with a grain of salt because this is coming from a guy who doesn't want to change his formula. That's
100%.
Fine.
Yeah,
that's fine. But he said that they really tried. They did all the R&D and they tried to figure out how they could change their cuts so that they could still get all the flavor profile that they wanted to have, and that the net proof off the still would be a little bit lower, so that they could get in under that 160. And they couldn't do it reliably so that it tasted the way they wanted it to taste. That's what he says. By the way, I'm going to try to have him on the podcast. He's been on my list of people to interview for like the last 9 months, and somehow I just have never gotten him scheduled. And now I feel bad because I really would have liked to have him on before the ratification happened. It's going to be a different conversation now.
Yes, it is. But I would say based off his information, right? There's always new science and new information that is coming out from everywhere. So there could be some way in the near future that he could change it up with a new fermenter or new yeast strain. It just depends on what he's going to do and how he's going to do it. But as for definition wise, I think the TTB did some justice to this, and we need to keep this into a regulated amount.
Yep.
It can't be across the board, and it can't be everywhere.
From a consumer perspective, again, now that we've acknowledged the existence of Brother Justice and their reasonable objection to this.
Yeah.
And we still said we have to draw the line somewhere.
Correct.
So we're going to include the vast majority of people who are involved with the commission.
Yep.
And also, as a bonus, that proof maximum is the same as every other category of whiskey where the distillation proof is not a defining feature of the category. So light whiskey is a defining feature of the category that distillation proof is specifically higher than 160. Everybody else is 160 or below. So why would American Single Malt whiskey draw that line anywhere else without an exceedingly good reason?
No, and I 100% agree with that. But there's no but. I'm actually just going to agree with you, and I'm going to shut up at this point because that's set. Yeah.
Sweet. And same goes for, right. This is spirits proof. There's nothing
no,
at all
there's
controversial about that last point. 40% alcohol by volume is the minimum bottling proof. Period. End of story. I don't think anybody objected to that.
no one objected to that. I wanted to call out one company that I interviewed recently, and I'm not going to call them out here because she was extremely professional. She was very polite and courteous about everything she did, but she did call it bourbon. It is not legally bourbon. It's legally a liqueur that she was calling bourbon. And I did want to call the TTB on her, but I wasn't going to because she's also an attorney.
Yeah. Pick your battles.
Exactly. I'm going to shut up and sit here and look pretty. That's all I got.
Yeah, well, that's a new fear unlocked. I should make sure that whoever I interview doesn't have any legal credentials before I decide to challenge them on legal points.
Yeah, that's why I just stay quiet and just say I'm here to talk and interview you, and this is good stuff. Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
Yep. Well, as interviewers, we learn the best thing you can do is let your guest talk.
100%.
Which is why, I mean, I like doing a stream like this every blue moon because I like to think I know quite a lot about American Single Malt whiskey, but most of the time I just let my guests talk. So this is my chance to show off just a little bit. So okay, let's answer Ryan's question now. So Ryan says, I want to go further into that point Brian made. Confused who wouldn't declare the cask considering how much they cost and how it would differ from a core range NCO or ex-bourbon matured product. So good observation.
That is a great observation.
I just, here's my initial thought on that.
Yeah.
Besides that being an incredibly reasonable take, my initial thought on that, the same logic that makes bourbon hide their mash bills is keeping things a secret that really don't need to be kept a secret and might even be better not to keep it a secret. But there's still this idea that, to give an example, Joseph O'Sullivan, good personal friend of mine, doesn't want to talk a whole lot about Minden Mill yet because Minden Mill's marketing and media team are very tight-lipped and they haven't figured out their media strategy yet. And they haven't given him the leash to like, we trust you not to damage the brand when you talk to the media. Right. Minden Mill wants to keep the family Foley family wine and spirits wants to keep tight-lipped. Do they need to? Probably not, but that's the way they want to play it. So
I'm going to give a yes and no definition to that, right? Because they do know, or he does know what he's talking about. But in the same definition, he is not media trained. True. And you need to have some extent of media training or some extent of how to converse with larger audiences without being flustered or flabbergasted on certain comments and continue forwards with the conversation in a polite and courteous way. Sometimes he does not know how to do that. I'm not saying that's a bad thing or a good thing. It's just how you perceive a question, how you answer a question in a correct way. And I think that's how we need to continue forwards. And by you and I doing these different interviews with these different companies and younger companies, it'll actually help them become media trained because we ask certain definitions and questions that they would not be able to do or perceive without our help. It's like I was media trained.
Yeah, imagine that. I'm not. My day job is not this.
My day job is not this either. My day job is running a whiskey company, not interviewing.
Yeah, my day job has nothing at all to do with whiskey. So just to lay cards on the table. Right? People know, right? I'm a software engineer. Yeah. This is 100% a hobby project. And so like I have developed really good skills at like how to talk to people who are near strangers. I think that's good for my career. Because as I've grown up, grown up in the software engineering and become more senior, the ability to talk to people and not make them feel uncomfortable while you still need to get information from them. There's sometimes challenging them, right?
Yes.
right? Like, hey, you didn't do this very well, but be nice, but be nice about it and like help them grow.
Exactly.
There's an element to that. Um,
Let's get into this next question. We already actually answered that, so never mind.
I think it's part of the previous one. The
Yeah.
verbiage used, but something about not disclosing finishing. Yeah. It's just
Yeah.
that with bourbon, you have to disclose finishing, and technically at that point it becomes a distilled spirit specialty or something, and it was born
Right.
as bourbon, but you put it in a port cask, so now it's Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey finished in port casks.
Yes.
Angel's envy.
Well, you said it, not me, so it's fine.
I like having that example to pull out because they are very front and center on a pretty bottle, but it's not just bourbon. It's Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey finished in a port cask or port barrel or port pipe or whatever it is that they said. And that is its actual legally defined TTB applied for and approved type of whiskey. It was based on bourbon and based on this precedent of doing finishing, but it is no longer bourbon. So the idea that I think also quote port, and yes, it's probably not actually from Portugal. That's the other thing. Port style dessert wine from Kentucky or whatever. I don't actually know. That may or may not be true.
I do know a few people from that company, so I can actually get that information and let you know.
Cool. I'd appreciate that.
Yeah.
It's always good to update my knowledge.
I will let me put that on my list of things to do for tomorrow, because I will forget after this, because I'm in the process of writing a book as well and doing a lot of other things at the same time.
Yeah. What's the book about?
Environmental
American
agreements.
Single Malt whiskey, Doug, and you no longer have to write a book.
God, no. So it's people from different environments, from all the way from tech like yourself, all the way up to CEOs of different companies around the US, giving information on why they enjoy whiskey, and more importantly, American whiskey, and how that's defined them in their roles. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
I actually had a title for the book. Where is it? I just interviewed like 7 people the other day.
Sometimes I think I should push harder to have more interviews in a shorter period of time. Speaking of which, I did 4 producer Here's a little self-promotion. Sorry.
There we
1
go.
minute.
Do it.
I did 4 producer interviews in a really short period of time recently. Why? We're doing a holiday special, and the American Single Malt Whiskey Ratification threw off my editing schedule. So it was supposed to come out today or tomorrow, but it's not.
Yeah.
It's probably going to come out Monday. Because I have Daniel Whittington, Caitlin Bartlemay, Mark Viertaler, and Tyler Peterson. So that's Daniel Whittington of the Wizard Academy, Caitlin Bartlemay of McCarthy's, Mark Viertaler of Del Bach, and Tyler Peterson, Master Distiller of Westland. And I had them on for a holiday special, which was loosely themed around the Christmas Carol. So Daniel Whittington is Jacob Barley.
Oh my God.
And in order, we have Bartlemay as the Ghost of Christmas Past, or Ghost of Spirits Past, and Del Bach as present, and Tyler Peterson as future. And it was a lot of fun to film, and I hope that comes across in the edit. I have a choice of whether to edit for most cringy, most serious, or a balance. And I'm probably going to go for the balance and let the outtakes speak to cringe, because
I think that's how it should be. Yeah.
That's how it should be. Yeah. So that's going to be a lot of fun. And this concept came up last year. And now that we have the ratification, we have a nice little end cap to throw on the end. So we're going to hopefully get all of those people in a single call and record like a 5-minute toast. That's the one last thing I want to throw into it. But yeah, watch out for that. That's definitely the highest effort project I've ever done, besides writing the book, which is not done yet, so I can't say I've done it.
I'm right there with you. This one, I just came up with the title the other day while interviewing a CEO: The Totality of a Hangover and How Whiskey Made Success.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
I want to read it. I'm sold.
Yeah. So I'm at 70 pages right now. I have probably another 70 to go.
Yeah. Oh, hey, Ryan Legend says, I'm trying not to spend any more money, but K&L keeps dropping more Scotch picks. You want to talk about spending more money? Lost Lantern is doing a fire sale on American Single Malt right now.
Stop it. Well, and it's only until actually midnight.
Midnight, shit. It's already past midnight East Coast.
Not for me.
Midnight East Coast. They're in Vermont.
I know, but it has to follow along with all US standards of where you're at.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Okay. Well, I guess that means I have 2 hours to decide what I'm going to order.
There you go. I saw that as well, and then I realized I looked
cool.
at where my money was.
Cursor in Seattle. You should absolutely buy our rum cask McCarthy's barrel pick. It's always the link to that's always in the description. As far as I know, there's about 40 bottles left. It is same shipping for 1 through 6 bottles of anything from the Hood River portfolio that you can buy on that website. So if you want to make your $20 of shipping go a little bit further, you could also throw in, they've got the pear brandy is great. They have some apple brandy products as well that I really like. They have a Kirsch, they have a blue plum brandy, also known as Slivovitz. They also have Trails End bourbon, which is Kentucky straight bourbon finished in Oregon oak casks. I really like that. Some people that I know that like more Scotchy flavor profiles don't like that as much, but for me as a bourbon with a little twist on it that makes it a little bit different, because it's hard enough to make bourbon different. That's a really good bourbon. Ryan, what did you buy 8 of? Oh yeah, Virginia Distillery Company Hardywood gingerbread stout cask finish. They're the Brewers Coalition from Virginia Distillery Company. It's not the VDC series, but the Brewers Coalition. Why can't I say that? Brewers Coalition.
There you go.
The Bourbon County stout cask finish is my favorite between the two, but they have 2 of them. So Hardywood also really good. Yep. So he bought 8 of the Hardywood.
That makes more sense. Okay.
Yeah, 45 to 55 with tax and shipping.
Yep. I'm good. Like I said, I've already spent enough.
So have I, man.
This year. Ugh.
Yeah, I'm tapped out.
Yeah.
And I'm still gonna buy things, but it's going into irresponsible territory at this point.
Yeah, no, I recently looked back at my transactions and saw how much I spent this year on whiskey. And
Never look.
Oh, I did. I had to. Like I can't. What can I consider this as a tax write-off for bourbon?
I'm gonna be talking to my accountant soon and figuring that out. I've been keeping records. I got a new accountant specifically because of podcast write-offs. If it shows up on stream, it counts, right? So it's something like that.
Does it?
Is there? I think if it shows up in your background or you talk about it, it counts. There's a certain interpretation of the rules that works that way.
Oh man, there's so much I'm gonna fucking
start putting more bottles in your streams. Stranahan's, Westland.
Oh no,
Dakota's Catalet from earlier.
There's normally a lineup right here. Yeah. That I have. I mean, there we go.
Yeah, nice. Here, let's make them big so people can really see it for sure, right? Yeah.
Lineup.
Oh,
all right.
Bigger,
cool.
Bigger. Okay. Let's go bigger. Go bigger, go.
Jeez. Okay, there we go.
Oh, look at all those Wellers. Good for you.
Yeah, no, I have that just because Wellers.
I try to rotate these, and it wasn't a tax thing. I try to rotate what's in my background. Most of my bottles are in those cabinets. There's 4 cabinets over there. And I used to have my work desk facing with that behind me. So I didn't want to have all my whiskey on display. I've rearranged the room. That's not really an issue anymore, but I'm still stuck with those cabinets. So I don't have my whiskey on display. As a result, I try to rotate out what is on display. And then I realized that's a really good idea, because now I can probably write off more of those bottles.
Well, I can guarantee you that's what I will be doing from now on, because if I knew that, I would have saved those receipts and continued forward with it.
Yeah. This is not financial advice. I'm not an accountant. Talk to your accountant, blah, blah, blah. Okay.
Yes.
Is there anything else in the regulations that's worth talking about?
So those are the primary regulations, right? So I mean, let's go back to transparency, because transparency gave a little bit more of a transactional um, defiance of what we could actually go into. Labeling will comply with the TTB, right? That was in there. Brand name, label, material, everything that needs to be required to it should be required to it. Now, in the definition of everything that it states, the city and state of both the distillery and the bottling should be labeled. I 100% agree with that. And that could actually help out tremendously in what's going on with it. I would have to walk out of here to go grab an American Single Malt because the rest of them are in my dining room on a table or in my bar or on the side counter. I don't even fucking know anymore.
Yeah, I could spot check a few. I didn't realize. I knew that I knew that they had this on there, but I didn't realize it was part of the pledge. Distilled and bottled by Whiskey Del Bach in Tucson, Arizona.
Yep.
VDC is within arm's reach. Let's check that. Distilled, matured, and bottled by Virginia Distillery Company with an address down to the state, of course. Down to the city and state. They also put the DSP on here, but this is a bottled and bond, this particular one. So I think the DSP is required on a bottled and bond, but they might
DSP is required on a bottle and bond, yes. So this one does not have the DSP. This is from Courage and Conviction.
Yeah, cool. I have the VDC Blue Ridge, same deal, but they don't list the DSP.
I had a shooter. Does that count?
Shooter?
Yeah.
Oh, the Courage and Conviction shooter? Well,
yeah.
I mean, so does that not say city and state? It's a small format.
No, it says actually city and state on it.
Cool. Nice. Probably not the full address.
No.
And now, just out of curiosity, I wonder what Sentinel says. Distilled and aged in Indiana, finished, blended, and bottled by Whiskey Del Bach in Tucson, Arizona. So they're applying that same standard to their products that aren't single malt also.
Right, yeah. But then I have
Westland Solum.
Yeah.
I'm sure they comply.
The Westford Solum does comply.
Yeah, Westland Distillery, Burlington, Washington. Yep.
Cool.
But the
didn't need to spot check all those labels live, but hey.
Hey, so sometimes you got to do that. But by defining and procuring the definitions and showing that, it's better to have it than not. So can Del Bach be considered by these standards, the transparency standards, not the TTB standards, in American Single Malt at this point? Because it says distilled in Indiana, it does not give the city.
Oh, well, so that's their Sentinel Rye product, though.
I understand that, but even their American Single Malt, or I'm just throwing out a name, right? It does not have to be Del Bach. It doesn't have to be anybody in particular to that standard. But if a company just did MGP, or if they did Dickel, or if they did Buffalo Trace, were able to get a contract with another company, and they did not want to do that, are they considered an American Single Malt by the standards of the transparency and not just the TTB?
Well, that's an interesting question. I will say, though, that it doesn't have a legal bearing.
It does not.
This is about membership in the ASMWC, and therefore it's an internal matter of ASMWC. If the leadership of the commish thinks that Del Bach is not being transparent enough with their Sentinel product to be considered to be following the transparency clause here, although a certain reading of this only applies to the American Single Malt whiskey products, but either way, right? It's an internal matter.
Right,
they'll discuss that. They'll figure it out. And I can't imagine why they would have a problem with complying if they were asked about it. So
sometimes there are those NDAs where you cannot disclose the distillery that you actually got the product from. So would that be an issue at that point? Or how would you do a workaround with that issue?
I honestly, this is a great question for Steve Hawley next time I talk to him. But I don't have the context to answer this question.
I know, but that's
an interesting question.
You could add that into your book.
Yes, I could.
Yeah, by definitions and by transparencies, how does one define when they have an NDA?
No, I've just dead aired while I was taking notes. But yes, it's a
No,
really
you're
good question
good.
to explore. Um,
I'm curious.
cool. New question.
Yeah,
Or go ahead.
so do the last one that just came up.
Yeah.
Yep, there we go.
Cursor in Seattle says, I'm curious about smaller territorial definitions like Iowa single malt that Cedar Ridge uses and how they will or will not change their labels. Yes. If I didn't talk about this, it's probably because I got distracted. So, American single malt whiskey is the phrase that has been legally defined, which means that Texas single malt whiskey is not an American single malt whiskey unless they put
Correct.
somewhere else on the label American single malt whiskey. And
they
Stranahan's
can-
Colorado, they don't put Colorado, but like Stranahan says Rocky Mountain single malt whiskey, and I think they're going to have to change to say American single malt whiskey.
Well, they can put it somewhere else, like you defined. It does not have to be in. It has to be in a certain font and everything like that, and it has to be a TTB label approved. But
and it
they
has to
can
be on. It has to be in prominent feature on the front label is part of the rule there.
Correct. Yes. But what is a
So
prominent?
probably they'll incorporate it into the main logo design, which means they're very likely to change that single malt whiskey to American single malt whiskey in more or less the same
Yep.
spot. I think the biggest problem here, here it is. I think the most problematic label with respect to that question, and I don't mean that like Balcones. I don't know that Balcones has done anything problematic, right? But like in terms of they'll probably need to change. Texas single malt whiskey. Texas whiskey is in one font, single malt is in another. I think this label is going to change significantly.
I don't, to be honest. I think they're going to be able to add that in next to the single malt, or they're going to be able to add American single malt into it, just in a shorter font.
That's a possibility that they could say Texas, Texas American single malt whiskey.
Yep.
The problem with that is the awkward turn of phrase. First of all, they'll probably claim straight as well. So the problem there is the awkward turn of phrase that you have Texas and then American. Looks weird.
Well, it can be a turn of phrase, right? But if you're defining something in more of a definitive feature and you want to say it's from Texas, then having Texas right there on the label, they can move it a little bit higher, right? The Texas part.
Yeah, I think they'll move the Texas higher. Yeah. So when I say change significantly, I mean spacing is gonna change. Parts are gonna move up and down because I think they'll emphasize Balcones Texas 1. Yeah, because that's what the product is called, and people like the 1 is in there. You can see it's glossy on the label. That's actually the name of the product. This is their 53%, not lineage. This is the step up, the 53% Texas single malt.
I actually got that bottle in Iowa for $35.
Nice. Good deal.
Yes.
I got this for free from a friend because he didn't like it.
Even better.
But I bought I knew that I liked it already because I bought the single barrel and that was like $65. And I bought that in Texas at a Goody Goody.
Oh, Goody Goody.
Shout out to Goody Goody. So I think they'll put emphasis on Balcones Texas 1. And then lower on the label, they'll write American single malt whiskey or straight American single malt whiskey. I think probably all in one font.
Yep. So,
yeah, we'll see some changes to some labels like this one, is what I suspect. The question is when, because they've got a grace period of 5 years. I suspect that Balcones will want to claim the type American single malt whiskey sooner than later.
Well, I mean, with who owns the company currently, absolutely, they're going to want to change that as fast as possible.
Yep. Diageo, by the way, for anyone who doesn't know, who missed that earlier. So to explore this question a little bit further, in my comments to TTB, I suggested that turn of phrase Texas American single malt whiskey would be awkward, and that American should be allowed to be narrowed to a smaller region that's part of the United States of America. They didn't go for that. So maybe that will be addressed in closing the loophole about single malt later by the commission. Maybe not. And this is the thing where I suspect that Fluger single malt whiskey will still be allowed, or Fluger Texas single malt whiskey, even if they label it that way, will still be allowed because single malt and Texas single malt are not protected terms under this current regulation. But that's still a subjective TTB approval thing. I just think letter of the law, technically, they did close that.
They got close to that. I don't think they closed that, to be honest.
Right.
But that's neither here nor there, and I'm not going to get into what the legalities or what they're doing at their distillery, because that's not my place and it's not my distillery. Yeah.
And until somebody sends me a cease and desist, I don't have any such restriction on me.
I still work for a distillery, so I'm going to be as polite as possible.
Yep. Totally understand that. And I also, I try to be really polite and I try to be really positive and not call out brands negatively. I do feel bad that I'm using them in particular as an example of somewhere I think this went wrong. There are probably others, right? Like, let's be fair. I don't think that particular product is the only one that's an issue.
No, I would 100% agree that, but it's more of a controversial area or product that they have comparative to some other companies. We could also get into another one out of Chicago that everybody so loves. It starts with an M and ends with
well done.
Yeah,
they're decidedly not an American single malt whiskey, I should just say.
No, they are not. But they are actually making some other products besides just Malort. So they do make other products which aren't terrible. But is it whiskey?
That didn't even occur to me. It's just a liqueur, right? Did they label it a whiskey?
I think so.
Really? I thought it's just a wormwood liqueur.
I don't know.
You're gonna make me look this up right now.
Thank God for Lugal. If you don't get that comment, I'm sorry.
Search engine of choice.
I've actually tried to fucking get Lugal and it would not let me.
What is it made from? So on the label it says liqueur.
Yes, it does.
I'm not going to try looking up the cola. That's an interesting little research project to find out what they make it from, if it's disclosed. But I think that they're just typed as a liqueur.
It says anywhere between 35 and 40%.
So that's liqueur, but not spirits.
But also right at that spirits point, if it's at that 40%.
If they get all the way to 40%, yeah. Can you still call it a liqueur if it happens to be over 40%? I think so. Or is it a distilled specialty spirit at that point?
It's a distilled specialty spirit at that point.
Okay. Man, I should have talked to you on stream before. I love rules lawyering.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's one thing I am a bit of a nerd about, but I try to keep it a little bit quiet and let Martin run with it because he likes to talk more than I do.
Well, there's always a place for you if you want to come in and talk about rules on this podcast. So would love to have you.
When it comes to rules and definitions of everything that comes to it, I'm happy to talk anytime. Let's go down a little bit more, right? Since we already defined what we discussed as brand labeling, cities,
TTB requirements.
Yep.
And the last paragraph here. The overall spirit and intention of these transparency guidelines is to prevent consumer confusion by encouraging our members to accurately and clearly represent their sourcing activities and how these interact with their own production. They are not intended to make members disclose every aspect of their production, but simply to help consumers understand what they're drinking and where it comes from.
Yep.
Laudable, like, I have no problem at all with that statement, and I hope that everyone is complying with that. In fact,
I think that should be defined in every single aspect and avenue of anything whiskey related or spirits related that you do. If this was in that statement or in any definition of a TTB regulation, I think no one would have a problem because it's clear, concise, it's consistent with all laws and regulations, and it gives you a concept of, yeah, we're here to talk and relate whiskey and information, but at the same time, we're here to continue forwards in the best way possible.
Okay, so
Hey, Storm King, I know
having
that.
reached the end of the transparency thing, I went back to this list of distilleries. So it's always interesting to like explore, hey, what does it say, but also like what does it not say? So like we already know
Right.
that Brother Justice is not on this list because
No,
being out of alignment with the commission's proposed transparent, like with the rules and the transparency, they're not fully in alignment, therefore they're not a member of the pledged commission members.
yes.
I will say, I think Brother Justice, notwithstanding their technical exclusion from the category, still deserves to be talked about in the same breath as American Single Malt Whiskey. And as far as my moderation of the American Single Malt Whiskey Reddit, I welcome posts about Brother Justice regardless of this ruling. And on that matter, anything that's like adjacent to American Single Malt in philosophy, like I think even Talnua, being an American-made Irish pot still style whiskey, is like, because it doesn't have another home and it's like philosophically adjacent to American Single Malt Whiskey, I think that belongs on my subreddit. Which is maybe
Well,
I'm making not a great point by casting the net that broadly, but Brother Justice is just so barely not part of this definition that I don't think it's fair to exclude them. I would never moderate out a post. Oh, you posted about Brother Justice, they're not technically American Single Malt. I think that's gatekeeping in a way. TTB can do that gatekeeping. I don't want
right.
to do that gatekeeping. I think consumers should be free to explore whiskeys and know about whiskeys that are very close to being American Single Malt whiskey, that are operating in a transparent way. And I really do genuinely think Brother Justice is transparent.
No, Brother Justice is very transparent, and to the same breath, so is Talnua. So
Yep.
I know them extremely well, and what they're defining and doing is extremely relevant. Um, just because it's a pot still, right? They are making an American single malt.
Why isn't 10th Mountain on this list?
Because our owner's cheap.
Isn't it like $200 to join the commish?
Like I said, cheap. We know everybody on the list. I know most of these people on the list. But we've helped define and talk about it for a long period of time.
Oh, did Angel's Envy? So I accidentally clicked to Angel's Envy. Apparently, Louisville Distilling Company is Angel's Envy.
Yes.
They also have an American Single Malt now, don't they?
Yes, they do.
Like they just released a product. Okay, cool.
Yep.
So that's cool. Monotony Stillworks, we talked about that. Mini
Yep.
Mill, we talked about that. Oak and Grists, again, go support them because they took a lot of damage in the hurricane.
Yes, they did.
Old Line, good. Rabbit Hole.
Rabbit Hole,
I think of as a bourbon, but
they do make an American single malt. Yeah. Well, they do make an American single malt, which is actually really good. I've had it recently. Redwood Empire, phenomenal. Clear Creek distillery. There's also a Clear Creek distillery in Colorado as well, which is kind of confusing because Clear Creek, Colorado, Cedar Ridge, great.
Yeah, Cedar Ridge. Seriously,
Yeah.
quintessential. Like, I don't know if I had to pick a single American single malt that is my favorite.
Mm-hmm.
It is almost certainly a McCarthy's in any given year. I mean, I still think the McCarthy's PX finish is my favorite whiskey of all time. That's it. The Pit Boss. We haven't seen you in forever. Hello. I hear whiskey talk. You summoned me from the internet. We're already 3 hours and 15 minutes into this stream, so we're gonna wrap up anytime now. But thank you for joining in.
Let's go down through a little bit more of these, right? So, I mean, you have 1, 2, 3, 4.
Sorry to finish that thought on Cedar Ridge. Cedar Ridge might be the most consistently top tier American single malt that I have tasted. Everything I've had from them has been really, really like borderline some of the best whiskey I've ever had. Even if there's not a single bottle that tops the chart yet, I'm getting samples of the Untitled Cigar Batch and the wine, this year's wine blend thing soon coming to me. So
The red wine blend. Yeah.
yeah, if they arrive before I do my best of list of the year, there's a chance that that'll be in my top 5. But yeah, Cedar Ridge is definitely top tier American single malt whiskey as far as I'm concerned.
I
Okay,
mean,
let's
look
keep
how
going.
many Colorado's distilleries you have there.
Yeah,
Root Shoot, you have Deer Hammer, you have
13.
Stranahan's.
We have 13 Colorado.
Yeah, out of
On the list.
67 different distilleries.
Yeah, we have Laws.
Laws.
We have Root Shoot. Oh, Root Shoot. I forgot about Root Shoot. Root Shoot is great. So Root Shoot Malting
Yep.
also has spirits, Root Shoot spirits, that are distilled at Vapor Distillery, which is the actual physical location that distills Boulder spirits.
Correct.
And I have an interview booked with Root Shoot for soonish. So I forget the date. I'm not going to look on my calendar right now. I forget the date.
That's fine. Deer Hammer out of Buena Vista, 291 out of Colorado Springs, Eagle River. They're a newer one. I actually know them pretty well. Out of Minturn, that's actually pretty close to our distillery. So
cool. Okay, so 10th Mountain is also one of them, but they're not on this list. Golden Moon. I've never heard of Golden Moon.
Golden Moon is not bad. I really like them.
Storm
I believe
King.
it's Storm King's pretty good out of Montrose. I know them. Everybody
Obviously
knows Stranahan. Hogback Distilling out of Boulder. They're not
Oh,
bad
this
as
is
well.
the one I couldn't remember before. Ironton won some awards at
Yes.
ACSA. I think it's really good whiskey. I think they're kind of slept on, to be honest.
I do as well, but it depends on the marketing and the information that they're able to provide. And right now, as a younger distillery, you have to grow that portfolio and gain those awards to get that recognition, unfortunately.
Okay, this one I find very interesting. Talking Cedar Spirits. The reason I
Out of
find
Washington,
this interesting. So in Washington, the reason I find Talking Cedar Spirits in Washington interesting is because, and I don't know this for sure, I'll have to look it up, but Talking Cedar is the name of a brewery partner that does the wash for Copperworks. So if this is the same Talking Cedar and they also have spirits, and they make an American single malt, I really want to seek that out.
I'll find out. I'll message you tomorrow.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah.
Man, I should talk to you more often. You're a great resource.
When you work in the industry and you like to talk whiskey and you have fun with it, it's always a good time.
Is Ross and Squibb on here? No, I don't see. Did I switch tabs? No. Hold on. What's going on?
Yes, you did switch.
I did switch.
There
Okay,
it is.
hold on.
Ah,
Wait, no,
what the
I went back. What happened?
I don't know. You're pressing buttons.
We're back on the about page. Okay.
Oh, thank God.
Ross and no Squibb. No, I don't see it.
No, it's not. Okay. But Berlin is there. Oh, no. Current Spirits. I actually do like Current Spirits out of New York. I had one of their stuff recently.
The Pit Boss, are those American single malt whiskey distilleries you're referencing? The Windows Distillery. Kind of like having a mini MGP in my backyard. I wonder what you mean by that. MGP sort of by definition is large.
Yeah, so are you talking about MGP as in they have like a 2,000 gallon still? Or they have a giant column still that's 40 feet tall? Because I'm not.
I think it's enough to say, hey, it's cool that there's a distillery opening near you. Like I often
100%.
I'm thinking about this more recently, but I feel I take for granted the distilleries that are close to me because I could always go, right? And I've done a lot of emphasizing of like, let's talk to the guys in Santa Fe and the guys in Tucson and the guys in Iowa and New York and Virginia,
Yeah.
and like, because I'm not going to go to any of those places, so putting them on an internet only video call podcast makes a lot
Yep.
of sense. The guys that are close to me, I'm like, oh well, why would I ask them to call into a show when I could just walk over to the distillery, not walk, drive half an hour, whatever.
Right.
And I've tried that a few times, and in actual fact, I'm not good at taking recorded in person stuff and making it into a podcast episode. So it actually would be better if I invited them onto the show the way I do the show, but I take them for granted. So, and I'm trying not to. Whiskey Acres. I've heard of Whiskey Acres. Also, don't think that's American Single Malt whiskey. So just so you know, the Pit Boss, in case you haven't heard the news, American Single Malt whiskey has been ratified as of today. It is official. December 13th, the unofficial document came out. December 18th, today, it is officially entered into the Federal Register. January 19th, it goes into legal practice, which means that distilleries can start applying for label approvals with the type American Single Malt whiskey. So you've popped in a few times, so you know I mostly talk about American Single Malt whiskey. This is the biggest news I will ever cover, probably.
So no, it didn't happen a couple months ago. Yes, there were some regulations that came out, but no, it was not defined until today. Legally.
Yes, legally. It's a legal final thing now. For realsies. No takesies backsies. Unless they prohibition repeal their way out of American Single Malt whiskey.
Yeah, and then there's takesy backsies, bastards. But we do not see that in any definition or any defiance of a way. I mean, no one's going to be able to take that away from the 24th Amendment that happened. And hopefully that gets changed and ratified in the next few years as well. So smaller craft distilleries can start shipping on their own without a third-party vendor and do it in a more sensible fashion and cost benefit fashion.
Yeah, that's huge news. I also, like, if I had any agenda besides American Single Malt whiskey, it is craft whiskey being able to direct to consumer.
Yes.
That is a huge deal. Oh, and
Yeah,
by the way,
so
the Pit Boss, since you haven't been around, note that we did a single barrel pick. The McCarthy's 6-year, 8-month, 15-day rum cask single barrel. It's fantastic. I've heard from distillers all over the place that managed to get samples or bottles of it that it is a really good whiskey, and that is an awesome feather in my cap. And you can still buy it. There's a link in my like link tree, link in bio, wherever you can find the links to my stuff. There's a link to buy this bottle. So if you're interested in that, you should be able to find that.
yeah.
That goes for everybody else who's listening or still manages to find their way into 3.5 hours into this marathon.
Yeah.
Am I going to put this on my podcast? Jesus, at 3.5 hours, probably not. I'm going to have to cut this down.
Well, I would say so. But I mean, the amount of conversation we got out of this, the amount of definition and compliance orders that we can define in a legal sense, that again, we are not lawyers and be able to talk about, is phenomenal. But like you said, 3.5 hours in one podcast is a tremendous amount. You are not Joe Rogan or Sean Hannity or whoever the fuck else fucking does 3.5 hours of conversational agreements on one particular topic. Maybe in 3 years, when that ratification happens and you blow up randomly talking about, said something 3 years ago about this with a random guy that worked at a distillery.
Maybe someday I'll have tens of thousands of viewers and people will have problems with what I've said. Maybe.
They'll have problems with what I look like, so that's fine.
Yeah, so
white guy with blonde hair and blue eyes. Come on now.
The Pit Boss knows. Yeah, High West has a great American single malt. I haven't had it. I don't know that I don't know that I could agree with the great part, but they do in fact have an American single malt that people think is great. So I need to try it.
I may have it here. I have to look.
What's your battle pick run? What does that mean?
Usually a Mark 19 or a. Oh, sorry. That's yeah. We won't get into guns.
The philosophy that we follow in the Whiskey Lodge Discord is that we're okay with conversation of most things, but guns and whiskey do not mix. So
Well, you do not drink them or use them, or you do not drink and then use them, or use them and then drink. You have to have separation in time.
yes.
Yes.
Oh, barrel pick. What does
that
it
makes
run? What's the cost of our barrel pick? It's $120, $119.95 or $119.99 plus $20 shipping for up to 6 bottles from the same distilling group, Hood River Distillers. Yes.
Okay.
I'm mixing up where the plurals go. Hood River Distillers, Clear Creek Distillery, McCarthy's, Trails End. They have like 37 different products or 37 different brand labels and like lots of products or something like that. It's a lot. Yeah. So you can choose from their entire portfolio that they sell through their website and up to 6 bottles for $20 shipping.
Okay. Perfect. Well, I think this was a good spirited conversation, and the ratification.
I think we're pretty much wrapped up. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for joining. I really
100%.
enjoyed having you here. This is a lot of fun. We've known each other by being sort of tangentially in each other's orbits for a long time, I think. And now we're finally talking to each other face to face, which is pretty cool. Cursor in Seattle, thanks for joining. I think this is the first time we saw you. I'm glad you had a great time. I hope you tune in again. We do this almost every week or at least every other week for the foreseeable future. So yeah. And to finish that question about, I bought 18 bottles of my barrel pick and I've talked at length about why. They're not all for me. 6 are for me. I want to lose 2 bottles in my closet. I want 3 to enjoy now. I got an extra one for good measure. And the rest of them are gifts for friends and family and people who wanted me to get them, that, like combined order, all that stuff. I just haven't given them out yet. So I do have 18 bottles of the McCarthy's barrel pick in my room.
That's awesome.
So yeah, I did buy a 10th of the barrel by myself. All right, everybody, there's only one thing left to do, and that is turn this off and make our faces big so that we can cheers and get out of here. So did they give me the barrel? No. Okay, so the Pit Boss, go on my YouTube. We've done like 3 or 4 videos at length talking about this barrel pick and everything that happened with it. There's tons to learn that I can't cover in a Q&A right now because we have been going for 3 hours, 30 minutes, and we need to go on with our nights. So they didn't give me the barrel. What happened was we were trying to get the barrel staves so that Phil, my usual co-host, makes barrel stave pens.
Oh, nice.
This is a wild turkey stave. And we wanted to make stave pens out of our rum barrel, the McCarthy's rum cask. But before we could ask, and this was probably a better destiny for the barrel, they gave the barrel or traded the barrel to another company to finish some other product in the ex McCarthy's rum cask barrel. So someday we're going to get to try that product, but for the time being, we don't have the barrel. Someday, maybe. If we can keep tabs on it, maybe someday we'll get it back and we'll get to use those staves. But as long as that barrel has life in it, it should age more products. So that's the best thing.
Yes.
Okay, cool. So the toast is obvious. I think I just need to find a glass of whiskey that I haven't finished.
Okay. I have a little bit of this left, and I can do this one. This is the Brother whiskey. I can fucking open it. Jesus.
Okay, this is fun. Ever pour so many whiskeys, you're not quite sure what this one was?
Yes. Yes, I have.
Hold on. I'm nosing it and I don't think I know what it is. Let me taste it.
Yeah, it's
because I cap my whiskeys after I pour them. If I have these watch glasses that I put on top. This is actually something I poured yesterday while I was streaming with Germ. And the watch glass does a good job of keeping it from like evaporating too much. It lasts a day for sure, sometimes 2, 3.
Okay.
Then not really. So it's not an indefinite thing, but it keeps me from pouring it back into the bottle, especially if I was reusing a glass. I don't want to do that.
Right.
So I don't know what this is.
Fair enough.
I'm pretty sure it's this. Just like from the way it tastes and what's on my desk right now, but it
Yeah.
also maybe isn't. So okay, this I for sure know. This is a weird thing to toast to though, because this is like a weird Mountain Meadow is an odd category because it's hopped. It's a hopped wash. But this was my most interesting whiskey of the year last year. And since we're looking back at the end of the year, that feels appropriate. So let's do this one. So Brian, cheers to American Single Malt whiskey.
Absolutely.
And until next time, and I do hope there's a next time. And also for everyone who's still watching, which is basically nobody at this point. Until next time, we'll see you in the lodge. So good night, everybody. Thanks for watching.
Night.
Cheers.